The male lead transmigrated into another world with a system. In this world, some people awaken the power of ice, others the power of fire, or even the power of earth. These are all called arts. Although the male lead didn't awaken any art, he could copy them. As long as he touched someone's body, he could copy their art. This sneaky move, I totally love it. Last night's meteor shower was absolutely beautiful, but after the meteor shower, a small droplet accidentally fell into the neighbor's courtyard. Lin Xiao followed that droplet and transmigrated into a princess with the same name. At this moment, Lin Xiao had just woken up and saw a big bearded man. He panicked and instinctively reacted. The next second, he heard the sound of shattering. Panicked, Lin Xiao thought he, a straight man, had been violated at home. From their conversation, he learned the bearded man was named Sundali, Lin Xiao's personal bot, and Lin Xiao was the only child of the Lin family. Hearing this, Lin Xiao ran out of the mansion. Once on the street, he looked around. Now he was even more confused. Nothing around looked familiar at all. Could he have transmigrated? Suddenly, he saw people flying in the sky. His brain instantly overheated and shut down, and so, he fainted on the spot. When he woke up again, he was sitting by the gate with Sundali, dazed. Even with a rock about to hit his head, he didn't react at all, just kept sighing nonstop. No one knows how long passed, until Lin Xiao finally made peace with the fact he transmigrated. If I'm here, then I'm here. Whatever, I guess. After all, people transmigrate every day. One more doesn't matter. One less makes no difference. Just as Sundali was about to help Lin Xiao up, the moment their hands touched, something magical happened. A system was successfully activated in Lin Xiao's mind. At that moment, before Lin Xiao could even process what happened, the next second, a system prompt appeared. Loading. Sundali didn't know what the young master was up to, but his hand was being held tightly by Lin Xiao, with their fingers completely interlocked. Two men holding hands like that. Just thinking about it made Sundali blush. But Lin Xiao didn't care at all. Once the loading finished, the system told him he had gained a new art, super strength. A few minutes later, their hands finally separated. Sundali ran away crying. His hand had been held by another man for that long. He felt unclean. Just then, Lin Xiao, who had awakened his art, grabbed a rock and crushed it. Seeing this, Sundali was completely stunned. At this moment, Lin Xiao's eyes lit up. He could feel the sudden burst of strength. This must be the art Sundali spoke of. The ability to copy someone was simply too exhilarating. Just to be safe, he wanted to test it with someone else. He remembered Sundali mentioned earlier. There was a lady at the Pinxiang Pavilion who could bestow arts. In that case, he would go check out the pavilion and verify his theory. Soon after, Lin Xiao arrived at the entrance of Pinxiang Pavilion. A few beautiful ladies came over to greet him, enthusiastically promoting themselves. They said they could be salty, or sweet, mysterious, or charming. Obviously, our Lin Xiao isn't that kind of person. He's looking for a young lady who can talk to birds. Tossing out a bag of silver, he asked them to take him to meet that young lady. At this moment, Lin Xiao doesn't wait long in the private room. Soon, a young lady walks in. The visitor is none other than Haitang, who can talk to birds. After exchanging greetings in the traditional manner, Lin Xiao gets straight to the purpose of his visit. He immediately asks Haitang to translate what the little bird beside him is saying. Haitang casually replies. The bird is praising Lin Xiao's handsome looks. Hearing this, Lin Xiao's face is full of suspicion. After thinking for 5 seconds, he lets it go. Looks like this Haitang really can talk to birds. The reason being, Lin Xiao also thinks he's naturally quite handsome. This alone is enough to prove Haitang's ability to communicate with birds. Figuring this out, Lin Xiao suddenly grabs Haitang's hand, waiting for the system to copy her ability. Sure enough, the system doesn't disappoint him. It notifies Lin Xiao that it's loading. In no time at all, the loading reaches 99%. Just as it's about to succeed, the window is suddenly smashed open by something. Startled, Lin Xiao immediately lets go. As a result, the system notifies him that the loading failed. This infuriates Lin Xiao. Who can understand the feeling of a USB drive being yanked out after copying 99%? Family, who gets this? To avoid marrying the world's most beautiful woman, forced by his sister-in-law, Lin Xiao actually ran off to a brothel. 1 minute before the incident, Lin Xiao was still hand-in-hand with Haitang, the brothel girl, copying her art. The next minute, he was interrupted. The copy progress stuck at 99%. Then, a cold and icy young lady bursts into the room. She opens her mouth and demands Lin Xiao go home with her. Hearing this, Lin Xiao's face is full of displeasure. He opens his mouth and starts ranting, cursing at the young lady, because no one can understand the feeling of a USB drive being yanked out after copying 99%. The icy young lady doesn't indulge him. She kicks Lin Xiao's chair, sending it flying. Seeing how fierce the intruder is, Lin Xiao immediately crawls toward the door, crawling while calling for Sundali to save him. He wants to sue this woman for abducting a man in broad daylight. Then, the young lady delivers a chop to the back of Lin Xiao's neck. At this moment, Lin Xiao's final thought before passing out is that this woman ambushed him with no regard for honor. As it turns out, this young lady is Lin Xiao's sister-in-law. For the sake of her sister, she has to keep Lin Xiao in line, especially when it comes to visiting brothels. As night falls, Lin Xiao sleeps soundly. He He sleeps so well, it's already moonlit. When he wakes up, he sees son Dolly standing before him, which gives him a huge fright. As he moves, a sharp pain shoots through his tailbone. It's not just that son Dolly couldn't beat his sister-in-law, but son Dolly is no match for her at all. Rumor has it, his sister-in-law possesses a heaven-tier ice art, having just transmigrated. Lin Xiao, of course, doesn't understand this. Son Dolly can only explain it to him slowly. His sister-in-law is the second young lady of the Zhao family, named Zhao Lingying. Her older sister is Lin Xiao's fiancée, named Zhao Lingjun. Hearing this, Lin Xiao felt like she'd taken over 10,000 points of critical damage. Back on Earth, she was a legendary sea queen, but here, she'd been saddled with an arranged marriage. She decided this engagement had to be broken off, no matter what. She absolutely couldn't let it interfere with her future life of carefree galloping. Suddenly, Lin Xiao felt a cold sensation in her hand. Sensing something, she asked Dolly if she'd been carried back by her little sister-in-law. After Dolly's confirmation, Lin Xiao instantly felt the beating she took wasn't a total loss. As expected, she'd copied her little sister-in-law's skill. So, physical contact really allowed her to copy skills. Realizing this, Lin Xiao felt she was about to strike it rich. So she asked Dolly where the most skilled people gathered. Learning it was the Academy of Skills, Lin Xiao decided she needed a plan to infiltrate it. After all, in this world, might made right. With this in mind, fueled by her mosquito-like hunger for power, she still had to visit Pinxiang Pavilion to acquire the skill of beast speech. Otherwise, getting beaten by her sister-in-law was for nothing. Not long after, Lin Xiao met Miss Haitang again. This time, Lin Xiao skipped the pleasantries, immediately grabbing Miss Haitang's hand to start copying. In the private room, they chatted while Lin Xiao copied her skill to win Lin Xiao's favor. Miss Haitang nearly spilled her entire life story. Lin Xiao, while copying, comforted her, saying the world was harsh and too much for a woman to bear alone, and that purity or filth lies in the heart, not the body. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Miss Haitang's eyes welled with tears. No one had ever said such things to her. Overwhelmed with emotion, she cried her heart out, wishing to devote herself to Lin Xiao on the spot. As the mood grew tender, the system notified that the copying was complete. Lin Xiao abruptly let go of Miss causing her to stumble onto the table, despite Lin Xiao's rough treatment. Still, Miss Haitang poured out her feelings to Lin Xiao, vowing to work toward buying her freedom and starting an honest small business in the future. However, Lin Xiao didn't respond. She headed straight for the door. As she passed a birdcage, she heard a bird's call, instantly understanding its chirps, which meant Lord Bird saw Lin Xiao leaving and demanded she give him a smile. The next second, Lin Xiao spun around, flashing what she thought was her most sincere smile at Lord Bird. This startled Lord Bird, his feathers exploding everywhere. After Lin Xiao stepped out of Pinxiang Pavilion's gates, she thought, since she'd taken Miss Haitang's skill, she ought to be grateful. It seemed she'd need to visit Pinxiang Pavilion often to look after Miss Haitang. Was this just an excuse to openly frequent a brothel? Perhaps. But she hadn't gone far when suddenly a chilling sensation came from behind. It immediately gave Lin Xiao a bad feeling. Turning around, sure enough, her little sister-in-law was chasing after her. Her sister-in-law's face was dark and grim, smirking at Lin Xiao, as if she'd seen the funniest thing in the world. When it came to marrying the most beautiful woman in the world, Lin Xiao was completely against it. So he went to visit a brothel. Just as he stepped out, he ran into his sister-in-law. The moment they met, she slammed Lin Xiao against the wall. From their conversation, we learn, turns out, she saw Lin Xiao leave the brothel again, and assumed he'd been up to no good. Lin Xiao tried to argue, but she threatened him by saying she'd cancel his engagement to her sister. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this great news, Lin Xiao accidentally burst with strength and forcibly turned around to respond to her. He gladly accepted her kind proposal and eagerly insisted on holding the cancellation ceremony today. Hearing this, she raised her hand to give Lin Xiao a karate chop to the neck. Lin Xiao exclaimed internally, "You're the one who brought up canceling the engagement. Now someone agrees, and you want to hit me? Are you even reasonable?" The next second, Lin Xiao grabbed her attacking hand, except he unintentionally used ice art. The spot he grabbed frosted over instantly. Immediately, his sister-in-law cried out in shock, realizing Lin Xiao had awakened his art. Seeing this, Lin Xiao didn't know how to explain. He couldn't exactly say he hadn't awakened anything himself, and all his abilities were just copied from others. Her expression suddenly changed, and she smiled at Lin Xiao, telling him since he awakened, he should train properly, and if she ever caught him at a brothel again, she'd break all his legs. With that, she hummed a tune and walked off. Seeing this, Lin Xiao was left with a face full of question marks. He awakened art. Why was she more excited than him? Not long after, just as Lin Xiao reached home, Dolly came rushing toward him, telling Lin Xiao his mom and dad had returned. Sure enough, they were waiting for him at the door. Seeing the parents of his body's original owner, Lin Xiao's mind raced, and quickly came up with a good excuse. That to pretend to have amnesia. During the conversation, as Lin Xiao failed to recognize them, son Dolly tried to explain to his parents that it was because Lin Xiao got hit in the head by a meteorite and suffered memory loss. But as a blessing in disguise, he also awakened Tianjin's ice art. Hearing that, The parents were finally relieved. They said, as long as Lin Xiao was safe, they were happy. They didn't care if he became someone great, as long as he was safe and sound. As for Lin Xiao, his dad had landed a job as a clerk for King Liswen. Though not an important post, the salary was enough for a comfortable life. At that moment, their love for Lin Xiao was absolutely sincere. Lin Xiao was moved to tears. Perhaps in his past life, he was an orphan and never knew family warmth. After gulping down a bowl of soup, he felt like it tasted just like a mother's love. The most delicious thing in the world. Was this the warmth of home? During dinner, the parents gave it some thought and decided that the marriage arrangement between the Zhao and Lin families needed to be reconsidered carefully. Now the Lin and Zhao families are worlds apart, so this engagement feels more like the Lin family is clinging to the Zhao family. Hearing this, Lin Xiao agreed it made sense. Instead of marrying in humiliation, better to cancel the engagement early. Seeing how quickly Lin Xiao agreed, his parents were both surprised. Then, after a few words of comfort, his father promised to find him a more suitable wife right away and get him married off as soon as possible so they could have grandkids quickly. Speechless, Lin Xiao bolted. She felt that at 18 years old, marriage was way too soon for her. Early the next morning, Lin Xiao started thinking about ways to improve her art, but she had only just arrived in this world, completely clueless about such things, and she couldn't just ask others directly, or they'd realize she wasn't the real Lin Xiao. Suddenly, the door swung open. It was her sister-in-law. She immediately told Lin Xiao to come with her. Then she told her brother-in-law to strip. Is this moral corruption, or a collapse of ethics? Early in the morning, the sister-in-law took Lin Xiao to the Academy of Arts. Turns out, because Lin Xiao awakened her art too late, she missed the registration window. Her sister-in-law used her own connections to get the dean to accept Lin Xiao as a student. Lin Xiao hadn't expected such a surprise to come so suddenly. One minute she was stressing over how to improve her art, the next she was officially enrolled. People nearby started gossiping. In fact, everyone knew Lin Xiao, son of Ping and Bo, used to be a complete loser, but now even he could awaken an art. Truly a rare event. And he actually got into the Academy of Arts. It must be Zhao family pulling strings. At this moment, even Lin Xiao felt like he was riding coattails. But hey, this coattail ride, he got to break off the engagement and got into the academy. This sister-in-law was really capable. Just then, his sister-in-law suddenly apologized to him. It was for what happened before. From their conversation, it became clear. Lin Xiao had believed her when she said she'd help him cancel the engagement, but unexpectedly, she backed out. She said the Zhao family always keeps their word. No matter what happens, the engagement remains. This left Lin Xiao dumbfounded. Did she grab the wrong script or what? This plot wasn't supposed to go this way. Then, his sister-in-law comforted him again, saying that even if his art awakened late, still, the game isn't over. We're all dark horses. Finally, she told Lin Xiao. Her sister had already awakened 5 times. If he wanted to be worthy of her, he'd have to work hard, and if he dared slack off again, she'd beat him to death. 2 days later at the Lin residence, Lin Xiao was training diligently. It turns out, each awakening of art not only significantly boosts power, but also unlocks new abilities. The key to awakening is accumulating enough primal force. The fastest way to train art is to temper oneself in a matching environment. However, on a day hot enough to roast pigs, training ice art under the sun was basically working against nature, so it had very little effect. She nearly worked her lower back to death. 2 hours later, Lin Xiao finished her training. She stepped out for a drink and some rest, only to realize her strength had suddenly increased. Turns out, while training her ice art, her strength art had also improved. Training one ability also upgraded the others. That's insane. Just then, as Lin Xiao was happily celebrating to herself, a voice rang out behind her. She turned to look. It was her sister-in-law. Her stealthy comings and goings. Lin Xiao was starting to get used to it. However, this time was a little different. The first thing her sister-in-law said was for Lin Xiao to strip. The moment she said it, Lin Xiao was completely flustered. She wanted to flirt back shyly, but before she could even speak, her sister-in-law waved her hand and released a flurry of ice shards. In the next second, Lin Xiao's clothes were shattered into pieces by the ice. Unfortunately, her pants were still intact, and so, her sister-in-law shut the door, and the two of them stayed inside for a full hour. When the door finally opened, her sister-in-law came out blushing. She left behind one comment. Not bad. I'll come back tomorrow. Then left straight away. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao hobbled out with sore legs and back, saying she looked forward to her sister-in-law's next visit. Not long after, once her sister-in-law left the house humming, Dolly sneaked over to ask Lin Xiao if she had already bagged both sisters. In contrast to real-life murder cases, where criminals only get held for 2 hours and then released. Truly lawless times. Just a minute ago, after the sister-in-law left, Dolly teased Lin Xiao again, saying she wanted to conquer both sisters. People love to talk. Lin Xiao patiently explained that actually, her sister-in-law came over, stripped her down, and stayed with her alone, all just to create the right conditions for Lin Xiao to train her art. After saying this, she told Dolly to accompany her to Kinglisi tomorrow, righteously proclaiming she couldn't just keep collecting a salary without showing up. Shameless, honestly. Early the next morning, Lin Xiao brought Dolly to the gate of Kinglisi. Inside was a bustling crowd. So, they followed the crowd in, thinking there might be some big prize giveaway, but instead, they walked into a courtroom where a murder case was being reviewed. At that moment, both sides were arguing intensely over the death of the young girl, Miss Wang. The girl's father said his daughter had always been virtuous and would never enter someone's house to serve them, but Chin Song claimed that she had accepted his money and willingly came to serve, that no one had forced her. Hearing this, it was truly one side's word against the others. No one knew who to believe. However, the public didn't have much hope for old Wang. They didn't believe a commoner could beat the elite in court. In the end, the Kinglisi official declared, due to insufficient evidence, Miss Wang's suicide case could not be linked to Qin Kong. The official was mid-sentence when Lin Xiu suddenly interrupted. Next, Lin Xiu launched into her "There's only one truth" performance. After examining the body, she told everyone, Lady Wang didn't die by suicide. If it were suicide, her feet would hang limply. But her feet were stiff and pointed upward, suggesting she was likely already dead before being hung. Moreover, those who die by suicide, she concluded. The entire audience was struck with realization, suddenly enlightened, as if waking from a dream. A loud gavel strike echoed. Ultimately, the official accepted Lin Xiu's reasoning and declared the case had too many doubts. Qin Song would be temporarily detained. With that, he adjourned the court. Hearing this, Qin Song, backed by her powerful family, looked smug and confident. She believed she wouldn't be held long and would soon be free. After the crowd dispersed, Old Man Wang repeatedly kowtowed to thank Lin Xiu, helping the old man up. Lin Xiu thought this was all she could do for him. Some things were beyond her control. 2 hours later, outside the Academy of Skills gates, Qin Song, released by the authorities, immediately sought out Lin Xiu to vent her anger over Lin Xiu's meddling. She was furious and formidable. Lin Xiu was shocked by the Qin family's influence. A murder case this serious, and she was released after just 2 hours. Unbelievable. Now, Qin Song taunted Lin Xiu, threatening to break 2 of her ribs to repay her 2 hours in detention. Now, Lin Xiu was the nervous one. She'd only been in this world a few days, though she'd copied a few skills. Still, Lin Xiu had never fought anyone. When it came to combat, she had 0 experience. Qin Song didn't care about that. As she began channeling her skill, the next second, her feet were suddenly encased in ice. The ice crept from her soles up to her calves. She was trapped. Qin Song froze for a moment, realizing who had intervened. Only one person in the Academy of Skills possessed a heaven-tier ice skill. So, she shouted Zhao Lingying's name, demanding to be released. Zhao Lingying ignored her completely. Though this man, Lin Xiu, had little going for him besides looks, still, only she and her brother could bully him. No outsider had the right. Without hesitation, like a women's soccer star, she unleashed a powerful kick, sending Qin Song flying over 10 meters. She then warned Qin Song, next time, she'd kick her straight into a goalpost. Hearing this, Qin Song didn't dare challenge Zhao Lingying, but she hurled a few taunts at Lin Xiu. Before slinking away, she muttered insults. Once she was gone, Lin Xiu asked her little sister-in-law what skill Qin Song had used. Her sister-in-law told her it was an Earth Tier 10-branch skill. Lin Xiu wasn't yet a match for Qin Kong. She'd need to awaken another skill to pin Qin Song to the ground and dominate her. Hearing this, Lin Xiu nodded. Lin Xiu finally resolved to get stronger, fast. In this world, strength makes you the boss. As a master of charm, you not only need to read women, but also understand men. On a dark, windy night, Lin Xiu, eager to learn more about arts, stays late at the academy reading before heading home. Along the way, the master and servant chat and laugh as they hurry along. Suddenly, a small dog barks frantically at a narrow alley. Lin Xiu, who can understand animal speech, hears the dog saying, "This guy's been hiding in the alley for so long. What the heck is he up to?" This startles Lin Xiu. The next second, a metallic dart glints, flying straight at Lin Xiu. Sun Dali leaps forward in 2 quick strides, shielding Lin Xiu, taking the dart square in his body. At that moment, a black-clad figure appears behind Dali, swinging a sword, aiming to cleave Dali in half. But unfortunately, Dali dodges it. Right now, Lin Xiu is so scared he's practically wetting himself, having lived 2 lives. This is his first time facing an assassination. Dali meanwhile notices the opponent can project true chi outward, clearly a skilled fighter. He tells Lin Xiu to run, while he covers the rear. Dali plants his feet firmly, cranking his martial arts power to the max. With a mighty roar, he unleashes a heavy punch. Even though the black-clad figure assumes a defensive stance, it's no use. After a loud boom, debris flies, and a cloud of dust rises. The one left standing is still Dali. Seeing this, even Dali is thrilled. He didn't expect to handle it so easily. He's so happy he's cackling. But the next second, Dali collapses flat on the ground. At this moment, Lin Xiu, as a master of not only observes women closely, but also keeps an eye on men. He notices the blood from Dali's wound is an unnatural color. He immediately guesses the dart was poisoned. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Lin Xiu carries Dali back home. anxiously waiting for the imperial physician to treat him. Regarding Lin Xiao's assassination attempt today, his father urges him to think carefully about who he might have offended recently. Hearing this, Lin Xiao's first suspect is Qin Kong. But before he can think it through, Qin Song, dressed just like him, in pure white, so white it's refreshing to the soul, Miss Bai steps in and gives Dolly a full-body CT scan. Then she tells the family it's not a big deal. She can handle it. Most importantly, she doesn't take bribes. With that, she unleashes her healing arts. Visibly, Dolly's complexion starts to improve. In no time, the toxins in Dolly's body are completely cleansed. At this point, seeing his bodyguard is okay, Lin Xiao respectfully escorts Miss Bai to the door. Only after watching her carriage disappear does he snap out of it. He realizes this healing art is pretty awesome and schemes to copy it for himself. Suddenly, his sister-in-law appears behind him, scaring the daylights out of him. He immediately spills everything that happened today, telling his sister-in-law every detail. He insists he was just being polite. He saw Miss Bai off, absolutely not trying to flirt or anything. Finally, after Lin Xiao exhausted every sweet word and was about to swear to the heavens, her little sister-in-law told her she already knew the full story. She came now, only to ensure Lin Xiao's safety. In the end, the two analyzed the case together, trying to figure out who sent assassins after Lin Xiao. According to her little sister-in-law's analysis, the feud with Qin Song wasn't serious enough for Qin. Assassinating a noble was a grave crime, one that could doom the entire Qin family. Hearing this, Lin Xiao speculated, if it wasn't the Qin family, it could only be someone she'd offended before her transmigration. But how could she possibly track that down? The moon hung high. At that moment, in the Qin residence, Qin Song was still fuming over Lin Xiao. Even while roaming the night, she cursed Lin Xiao with every step. Suddenly, the candle flame flickered wildly. A figure appeared before her, sword drawn. Qin Song barely got out a question when the figure thrust a sword straight at her. This time, no one was there to shield Qin Kong. The next second, blood splattered across the door. The legendary Sea Queen, after transmigrating, was awarded her first ever good person card by her little sister-in-law. Last night, Qin Song was roaming the night and got taken out by an assassin. The next morning, Lin Xiao was summoned to Qingli Temple. There, Qin Song's body lay on display. Facing Qin Song, Lin Xiao couldn't help but admire. She was the only one who tangled with Lin Xiao 2 days in a row. Suddenly, Lin Xiao wondered if her little sister-in-law, to vent her anger, had secretly slit Qin Song's throat. Meanwhile, her little sister-in-law suspected Lin Xiao, unable to let it go, had hired a killer. Not long after, the coroner, after examining the body, told everyone Qin Song died last night at midnight. Her body had a single wound, a clean, precise sword strike to the throat. Hearing this, the Lord of Qingli Temple told Lin Xiao both their suspicions had been cleared. This case was likely the work of that woman. But who was this formidable female assassin? Lin Xiao was brimming with curiosity. At that moment, the coroner explained it was a female assassin with an awakened stealth skill. She came and went without a trace. After each kill, she left a few flower petals on the body as her mark. Hearing this, Lin Xiao thought of a game character, Ake, who could kill while invisible. If she could copy that skill, she'd be unstoppable. While Lin Xiao was lost in fantasy, the Lord of Qingli Temple continued. The two cases were unrelated, yet connected by cause and effect. First, a thief, while stealing, saw Lady Wang's youthful beauty and was struck with lust. But before Qingli Temple could fully investigate, the female assassin decided Qin Song and took her out last night at midnight. Hearing this, Lin Xiao, wanting to clear Lady Wang's name, sarcastically remarked to the official, what a pity for young Lady Wang. Dead and gone, yet still bearing unjust disgrace. In the end, because the case involved art, it had to be handed over to the Ministry of Arts. So, Lin Xiao and her sister-in-law could only leave Qingli Temple together. As soon as they stepped out, a crowd gathered around them. Old Master Wang, to thank Lin Xiao, rushed forward to stuff things into her hands. Because among all the officials present yesterday, only Lin Xiao spoke up kindly for his daughter. At that moment, another burly man carried in 5 huge baskets of buns. He said the buns were a gift for Lin Xiao. Turns out, he had been Old Master Wang's neighbor for over a decade and came to thank Lin Xiao on his behalf. Seeing this, Lin Xiao was dumbfounded. She thought, how could she possibly finish that many buns? Can't they just give her cash instead? If not that, a meal voucher would be fine too. But helplessly, Lin Xiao couldn't bring herself to reject their kindness, so she accepted them. In the end, she shared the buns with Qing Lizi's colleagues. Before leaving, Lin Xiao didn't forget her sister-in-law's share and casually handed her one. But her sister-in-law didn't take it. Instead, she told Lin Xiao, you're a good person. That caught Lin Xiao totally off guard. In the past, she was the one handing out good person cards. She never thought she'd be on the receiving end after transmigrating. As the two chatted and walked, they suddenly ran into that little dog from last night. Lin Xiao, who could understand its speech, learned that the pup hadn't eaten in 3 days and really wanted a chicken drumstick. So, Lin Xiao bought a drumstick for the dog and stuffed it straight into its mouth. This act from Lin Xiao moved the dog so much that it thought it. Feeling a connection to the little dog, Lin Xiao decided to adopt it, and she even gave it a name, called it Ugly yellow sis. Faced with such an awful name, the little dog could only roll its eyes in protest. After all this, her sister-in-law was totally stunned. Lin Xiao then frankly told her, this little dog once. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Lin Xiao's mind. She realized this speech ability could be incredible for gathering intel. It might be worth developing this potential further. Cut 2. Back at Qingli Temple, piles of buns appeared, leaving the magistrate quite puzzled when he learned they were from old Master Wang's neighbors. As thanks to Lin Xiao for speaking up in court to seek justice for the late Miss Wang, he fell into deep thought. After a while, the magistrate finally decided to summon the culprit who killed Miss Wang for a retrial. At that moment, the magistrate gazed at the large characters, justice shines bright, in the hall, and sighed. Some things simply must be done. If not, how can we face these kind-hearted people? For the first time, the long-lost internal martial art technique was revealed. Whether mastering it grants inner strength, even the editor doesn't know. Learn it and cherish it. The moon hung high, and inside Lin Xiao's room, Lin Xiao and her sister-in-law were diligently training in the arts. Here is the cultivation chant they used. Please commit it to memory. True mastery of qi must come from within oneself. Pay no mind to external origins. Time and chance must align. Every place has its, and every moment is its own place. Channel energy, stir divine force and internal power. Never allow any flaw. No dents or bulges. No breaks or disruptions. Use it without exhausting it. Move as the body moves. Follow the motion instinctively. Let the heart guide the power where it is needed. My advancement notes. Seek truth within emptiness. Tap, 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 tap. Just like that, time passed. Lin Xiao exhaled his final breath. Only then did his sister-in-law speak. At her instruction, Lin Xiao collapsed onto the bed from exhaustion. At that moment, he realized, training this art is incredibly draining. He felt like he could eat an entire cow. His sister-in-law didn't respond. She just told him to rest well. She'd return in a few days to help him train again. At that moment, before she could even leave, his mom walked in. She brought in a huge spread of food. Turns out, she'd just learned how exhausting art cultivation was. Afraid her son would starve. Even this late at night, she cooked a feast just for Lin Xiao to replenish his energy. Without hesitation, Lin Xiao's mouth watered at the sight of the dishes. He couldn't resist and launched a full-on attack on the food. While eating, he repeatedly thanked his mom. He felt that in both his lifetimes, nothing he'd eaten was ever as good as seeing her son eat so happily. His mom was genuinely pleased. She kept urging him to slow down so he wouldn't choke. That moment, such warmth, is something many could only wish for. The next morning, Lin Xiao went to Dolly's room. He saw Dolly already training his body. It was obvious. He'd fully recovered from the poison dart incident. As the two chatted and joked, a desperate voice came from outside. Hearing it, the two of them immediately ran out to see what was happening. Turned out, even their own family estate was out of food. They couldn't afford to feed everyone anymore. So, his mom wanted to give them some silver to go make a living on their own. Once Lin Xiao understood the situation, his mom handed him a hand-drawn Excel spreadsheet. Seeing such godlike handiwork, Lin Xiao couldn't help but flatter his mom repeatedly. She laughed happily at his praise. Then, Lin Xiao gathered everyone for a quick family meeting. At the meeting, everyone shared their opinions freely. After understanding the family's hardship, in the end, no one chose to. Witnessing this, Lin Xiao once again felt the warmth of family. That this is what home should be like. He even thought his transmigration wasn't a punishment from the heavens for being a playboy, but a divine blessing instead. He swore, for this family, he'd work hard to make money. Once the thought struck, Lin Xiao immediately hit the streets, looking for a way to make a living. However, the weather was unbearably hot. The streets were almost empty, and even when people did appear, they rushed by quickly. Suddenly, he overheard a conversation between two passers-by. Lin Xiao learned something very important, namely, due to the scorching heat these days, the entire royal capital was short on soldiers. This information, that remark hit Lin Xiao right in the sore spot. Cut to the next scene. The two of them arrive at the entrance of Moon-Plucking Pavilion. At a glance, business at the pavilion was completely deserted. The clerk behind the counter was slouched from the heat, lethargic. Suddenly seeing someone walk in, the clerk immediately stood up to greet them and asked what the two guests would like to eat. But Lin Xiao said they weren't here to eat. This left the clerk a bit. If you're not eating, why come to a restaurant? Then, Lin Xiao placed her hand on a teacup. Moments later, the tea inside had frozen into a block of ice. So then, Lin Xiao explained her real purpose for coming to the pavilion. She wanted to discuss a big business deal with their manager. A playboy after transmigrating, experiencing such drastic changes, really felt bizarre. Meanwhile, inside Moon-Plucking Pavilion, Lin Xiao and the manager were deep in negotiation, trying to strike a big deal. From their conversation, we learn Lin Xiao would provide ice to the pavilion, and the pavilion would pay her 10 taels of silver daily as wages. But the manager misunderstood, thinking Lin Xiao just wanted to use their well water to make ice and sell it. He even wanted to charge Lin Xiao 50 taels of silver per day for water usage. At the beginning, the two sides completely misunderstood each other, so naturally, the deal fell through. However, when Lin Xiao mentioned she might just go to their rival, Fragrant Pavilion across the street, to talk business instead, the manager finally realized what was going on. However, the manager's 10 taels but Lin Xiu firmly insisted on 50 taels. At that moment, the manager compromised, but with one condition. Lin Xiu was not allowed to supply ice to any other place. She had to be exclusive to Moon Plucking Pavilion. Anyone with a brain would never agree to such terms. That said, if they wanted Lin Xiu to agree, it wasn't impossible. They just had to pay more. In the end, after friendly negotiations, the manager agreed to pay 50 taels of silver daily wages, and for each barrel of ice, he would pay Lin Xiu 5 times market rate. With that offer, Lin Xiu finally agreed to exclusively supply ice to the Moon Plucking Pavilion. After a full day of hard work, as the two of them exited the pavilion, Dolly was holding a large chest in her arms. Inside was over 300 taels of silver. Earning that much in a single day had Dolly grinning ear to ear. But they hadn't gone far from the pavilion before that persistent sister-in-law appeared again. Seeing this, Lin Xiu instantly went into mama hen mode, protecting the silver like her chicks. She shouted at her sister-in-law, "Why is it she's everywhere she goes? Was she stalking her on purpose?" Upon hearing that, her sister-in-law ignored the accusation and instead asked, "Are you short on money?" Hearing that, Lin Xiu answered with her actions. Seeing this, her sister-in-law handed her own money pouch, which delighted Lin Xiu internally. Then, her sister-in-law had to remind Lin Xiu, although she can be greedy for money, she still has to consider her noble status. If this continues, it'll bring shame to the Lin family. However, reputation and face mean less than silver to a sea king. At that moment, Lin Xiu, with a look of righteousness, snatched the purse away. Then she told her sister-in-law that earning money with her own ability is nothing to be ashamed of. As for what others think, she doesn't care at all. After saying that, she turned to leave. She thought to herself, if the Zhao family looked on her petty and humble behavior, they might as well cancel the engagement. At that moment, her sister-in-law, for some reason, followed Lin Xiu around the streets. As they walked, they came across a child and his seriously ill mother. The mother was crying and begging, hoping for someone kind to give her silver so she could get her child treated. Hearing this, Lin Xiu immediately handed over some silver. Amid the mother's tearful gratitude, the three of them continued walking. Her sister-in-law told Lin Xiu that in the capital, most of these people were scammers. Hearing this, Lin Xiu didn't care at all. She even lectured her sister-in-law, saying that the silver she gave wasn't even enough for a meal at Jiayue House, but it could save a life. No matter how you look at it, it's worth it. Soon after, the three walked a bit more. Lin Xiu suddenly remembered she needed to buy a couple rolls of cloth for Aunt Wan, because Aunt Wan's clothes were practically falling apart. This action from Lin Xiu again puzzled her sister-in-law. Why buy things for a servant? Lin Xiu replied earnestly that these people stayed in the Lin household during its most difficult times. So to Lin Xiu, they were her family. A moment later, the three arrived at a noodle shop. Lin Xiu and Dolly slurped away. Only the sister-in-law looked down and didn't need a bite. Suddenly, she told Lin Xiu that although she's greedy and lustful, she's also frugal, kind-hearted, and unafraid of authority, so she counts as a good person. Surprised, Lin Xiu gladly accepted the good person card. To hear the normally fierce sister-in-law sincerely praise her was quite comforting. Immediately after, the sister-in-law seemed to have thought of something and suddenly stood up to make a major announcement. That is, when she returns, she'll convince her father that as soon as her sister returns to the capital, she'll immediately arrange for Lin Xiu and her to marry. However, this news was no delight to Lin Xiu. It was a total shock. Palace intrigue like this was a first for Lin Xiu, and she found it rather novel. An hour earlier, Lin Xiu and her sister-in-law were cultivating in the room. Not long after, Dolly came knocking. When Lin Xiu opened, she found out someone from the palace had arrived. A sharp male voice rang out. Lin Xiu, daughter of the peaceful nation, His Majesty summons you. You must enter the palace at once, without delay. Upon hearing this, Lin Xiu was a little dumbfounded. She had only ever seen eunuchs on TV before. In real life, it was her first time seeing a living one. At this moment, under the worried gaze of her family, Lin Xiu followed. Before long, the four of them arrived at the harem. On the way, Manager Li explained some palace rules to Lin Xiu. Finally, he instructed her to just do her job and focus on treating the soldiers. As for everything else, don't look if you shouldn't see, don't ask if you shouldn't ask. At this point, Lin Xiu finally understood why she was summoned to the palace, and she couldn't accept it at all. Clearly her sister-in-law was stronger, yet she was dragged in as the laborer. Daughters of marquises really are privileged. Such a pity for her big business at the moon-plucking pavilion. Seeing this, Manager Li, being someone who serves the emperor, immediately noticed the dissatisfaction on her face. Lin Xiu hurriedly explained, saying she was just worried about her lack of skills, that she wouldn't be able to treat many soldiers, and might be punished by the emperor. Hearing that, Manager Li simply repeated, just do your job well. The emperor will handle the rest. Not long after leaving Yoning Palace, they arrived at Changchun Palace. After greeting the noble consort, they were immediately met with a barrage of sarcasm and deliberate difficulties. The noble consort scolding them was actually just using them to vent at the empress, to show that she had the power to challenge her. Lin Xiu and the others didn't dare respond. Palace politics wasn't something outsiders could get involved in. One wrong word, and it would be a bloodbath for the whole village. In the end, after the consort was done venting, she finally allowed them to treat the soldiers, but warned not to make too much noise, or they'd be beheaded. Hearing that, Lin Xiao felt bitter. Working for free was bad enough, but having to worry about her life at all times? Who could understand the pain of a worker? After visiting countless palaces, they finally arrived at Qinshu Palace. At that moment, Lin Xiao was still tirelessly treating soldiers, but felt completely drained. Suddenly, a palace maid walked in and told Lin Xiao that these were fruits gifted by Consort Shu. The grapes on the tray glistened brightly. It was obvious they weren't ordinary grapes. Lin Xiao was overjoyed. After working hard all morning, only Consort Shu gave her grapes. As a reward, none of the other consorts got a single thing. So, Lin Xiao immediately began eating. After a few grapes, she felt that these grapes were tastier than any she'd ever had before she transmigrated. Chief Eunuch Li swallowed hard and told Lin Xiao that these grapes were tribute from the western regions. Even regular consorts couldn't get them. Only Lady Shu consort would use these grapes to reward her servants. Hearing that, Lin Xiao invited the 3 eunuchs to share the grapes with her, because she had no choice. Chief Eunuch Li had just said one sentence and swallowed 5 or 6 times. Raised under the red flag, Lin Xiao knew well how to respect elders and care for the young. After eating the grapes, Chief Eunuch Li led Lin Xiao to Ruidong Palace. According to the introduction, this Ruidong Palace used to house Consort Da, but after she passed away years ago, it was given to Princess Mingi. This princess has a bit of a strange temper, but as long as you don't anger her, it's fine. Arriving at Ruidong Palace, after paying respects to the princess, Lin Xiao finally dared to look up, only to see a blazing red young lady playing on a swing. That must be Princess Mingi. At that moment, their eyes suddenly met. Fortunately, no sparks flew, because the next second, the princess's expression changed, and she looked even prettier. Lin Xiao couldn't even look directly at her. In the end, the princess spoke. She told them to finish their task and get lost. The inner palace is no place that just anyone can enter. On Lin Xiao's first day in the inner palace, she went hungry the whole day. 10 minutes ago, she and the princess were still staring at each other. After receiving the princess's order, they finally went to treat the illness. As they walked, Chief Eunuch Li told Lin Xiao that the princess had also awakened her art, and it was the art of fire. Since fire and ice don't mix, no wonder Lin Xiao and the princess found each other annoying. Who knows how much time passed? Lin Xiao finished treating the princess. She thought her work was done for the day, but Chief Eunuch Li suddenly told her that next, they had to go treat Jiu Ping. Hearing that, Lin Xiao approached Chief Eunuch Li with a grim face. When he turned to look, he was so startled by her expression, he thought some ghost was coming to take revenge. Then, Chief Eunuch Li smiled brightly and told Lin Xiao not to panic. Then he took out a great tonic prepared for her by His Majesty. Primordial crystal. To be fair, this primordial crystal stuff actually looked quite decent. It was Lin Xiao's first time seeing it, and she had no idea what it was for. Seeing her confusion, Chief Eunuch Li explained. Turns out, this was a pure essence extracted from rare beasts. It could not only boost one's energy, but also aid in awakening, and even strengthen the body and spirit. It's suitable for all ages. Everyone who's used it praises it. As soon as he finished, Lin Xiao thought she was back on Earth, watching an infomercial for some health supplement. Actually, His Majesty the Emperor knew this was Lin Xiao's first time awakening his supernatural ability. Worried that his yuan power wouldn't be enough to treat the entire harem, he especially prepared yuan crystals for him. Absorbing the power from 1 yuan crystal is equal to a whole day of cultivation. Hearing this, Lin Xiao knew it was a precious gift, and his mind started scheming. After he thanked the emperor's ancestors in a certain direction, he resumed his busy bee-like work. Time flew by like water, and before he knew it, night had fallen. Lin Xiao finally walked out of the harem alive. By then, his eyes were sunken from exhaustion, and even his legs felt like floating as he walked. It was clear he was utterly drained. However, Chief Steward Li had no intention of letting him off. He ordered that from now on, every other day, Lin Xiao must come to the harem for treatment. In the end, Lin Xiao had no choice but to agree. Fortunately, he wasn't stupid either. Using his superb acting during treatment, he barely managed to trick Chief Steward Li into giving him 15 yuan crystals. Just as he stepped out the palace gate, he ran right into his sister-in-law. That girl really was omnipresent. But this time, it turned out to be a good thing. It turns out, his sister-in-law knew Lin Xiao was short on money, so she worked a day at Jiayue restaurant for her, and brought her the money she earned. In this situation, you have to understand proper social conduct. So, Lin Xiao pretended to refuse, saying it was money she earned from working, and she should keep it for herself. In the end, his strong-willed sister-in-law still shoved the money into her arms. Seeing his plan succeed, Lin Xiao's happy face could only pretend that, I didn't want it, you forced me to take it. In fact, his sister-in-law wasn't just delivering money, she also came to pick her up from work. Because of the previous assassination attempt, his sister-in-law felt that Dolly the bodyguard was unreliable. For her sister's lifelong happiness, she decided to personally step in. As the two of them walked, they arrived at a street-side wonton shop. Lin Xiao ordered 3 bowls of wontons and began devouring them. Because where she worked today didn't provide meals or lodging. Lin Xiao hadn't eaten all day. At that moment, his sister-in-law, as always, looked down on street food. Suddenly, his sister-in-law sensed a trace of killing intent from the rooftop across the street. But when she looked over, she saw nothing. Just as she wondered if it was a mistake in her perception, Lin Xiao had already finished all 3 bowls of wontons. Seeing that she was full, the two chatted and laughed as they walked toward the Lin residence. After they walked away, 2 black-clad figures appeared on the rooftop. From their conversation, it became clear they were professional assassins, sent to kill Lin Xiao. Since a single assassin failed last time, this time 2 were sent. But due to the last incident, his sister-in-law had taken matters into her own hands, personally escorting Lin Xiao to and from work. Faced with this, the 2 could only wait for another chance. After all, they didn't believe that woman could stick by Lin Xiao's side forever. What happens between 2 women will eventually need a man to step in and resolve. Early next morning, Lin Xiao arrived at the gates of Qingli Temple. She suddenly realized a serious problem. Once the Academy of Arts started its semester, what about her job? By that time, she'd have even less time to come to work. If a newcomer reported her, she might get kicked out on the spot. Suddenly, Lin Xiao came up with a good idea. That was to improve her relationships with her colleagues. Ideally, she could make them feel that she was important to the workplace. No sooner said than done. 2 hours later, a refreshing breeze filled the whole Qingli. It was like the AC was turned on. Turns out Lin Xiao was busy pleasing her co-workers. She bought breakfast, treated illness and heat exhaustion, serving her co-workers at Qingli with great care and comfort. Only Lu Qingfeng remained clear-headed, not seeing Lin Xiao as one of their own, just because of a few small favors. At that moment, Lin Xiao suddenly saw Su Wenshu rushing past. She casually asked what she was busy with. Turns out, Lu Qingfeng had received a new case and needed Su Wenshu to go to the scene. Hearing that, Lin Xiao knew it was her chance to shine. Of course she wouldn't miss it. She told Su Wenshu to sit and eat watermelon. She'd go help out at the scene. Not long after, Lin Xiao and Lu Qingfeng arrived at Wang Yuanwai's courtyard. At that time, staff were already surveying the scene. Hardworking Lu Qingfeng immediately devoted herself to the investigation. She found through her inspection loose bricks, injuries on the victim's ankle, and a head wound matching the blood on the flower bed. In the end, Lu Qingfeng concluded that Wang Yuanwai's death was purely accidental. The family could prepare the funeral in peace. But Lin Xiao didn't agree. She might not have Lu Qingfeng's expertise, but she had a special gift. She went straight to chat with a bird. Because the bird was at the crime scene and saw everything that happened, it witnessed the entire process clearly. After their chat, Lin Xiao told everyone that Wang Yuanwai didn't fall by accident. He was murdered. Upon hearing that, Lu Qingfeng was clearly upset. She directly questioned Lin Xiao's claim. Everything should be backed by evidence. All on-site clues pointed to an accidental death. Hearing that, Lin Xiao looked indifferent and said she had no evidence. But Lin Xiao suddenly pointed to a man and casually said, "If you don't believe me, just interrogate him." Lu Qingfeng immediately gave the arrest order. Nearby officers quickly took action. The man hadn't gone far before being taken down. At that moment, after being subdued, he kept shouting, saying he didn't mean to kill Wang Yuanwai. His spontaneous confession made the situation very clear. It was obvious he was the killer. Even Lu Qingfeng was curious. She asked Lin Xiao how she knew. Lin Xiao honestly told Lu Qingfeng she had just guessed. No one knew how much time passed before everyone returned to Qingli. Lu Qingfeng was reporting to her superior about the details of the case. From their conversation, it was clear neither believed Lin Xiao had solved it by guessing. She must have found a clue that others missed. As for how Lin Xiao could be so good at solving cases, no amount of walnuts could help them figure out that it was all thanks to a bird. Early the next morning, Lin Xiao arrived at work full of energy to begin another day as a mobile healing machine. But today, the Changchun Palace was unusually lively. As soon as she reached the gate, she heard noisy arguing coming from inside. Listening closely, she realized it was the noble consort throwing a tantrum. The reason turned out to be that Miss Shuang failed to heal the noble consort's pet cat. This enraged the noble consort so much that she ordered Shuang to be spanked 30 times. Upon hearing that, Lin Xiao immediately rushed in. She first greeted the noble consort, then claimed she had some medical knowledge and could try treating the cat. Upon hearing this, the noble consort looked full of doubt. Even the genius royal physician, Shuang, couldn't treat her cat. What could a healing machine do? Are you kidding me? At that moment, Lin Xiao told the noble consort not to be fooled by her young age. She was a traditional Chinese doctor with family heritage. Since the noble consort had no better option, why not give it a try? Upon hearing that, the noble consort finally relented a little and agreed to let Lin Xiao try. But if the cat wasn't cured, then the 30 spanks would land on Lin Xiao's, but instead, a brother-in-law who makes his sister-in-law blush. Is that really a good brother-in-law? Just earlier, after Lin Xiao lied about being a traditional doctor, the noble consort let her treat the cat. At that moment, Lin Xiao stared at the cat, seemingly diagnosing it, but she was actually listening to what it was saying. Don't forget, Lin Xiao had the art of bestowal. As expected, she heard the cat say its paw hurt. Something was stuck in it, and it couldn't pull it out on its own. After hearing that, Lin Xiao decisively pulled out the wooden splinter. The next moment, the cat jumped out of Shuang's arms. At that moment, seeing her cat back to normal, the noble consort was in a great mood. She immediately handed out generous rewards, but instead of a red envelope for Lin Xiao, she gave her a hairpin. After dealing with the noble consort's matter, Lin Xiao resumed her healing duties for the day, only leaving the harem at dusk. Right after stepping out, she ran into Miss Shuang, who had been waiting. From their conversation, it turned out Miss Shuang came to ask Lin Xiao how she figured out what was wrong with the cat. This stumped Lin Xiao, because she couldn't reveal her bestowed art. Everyone only knew her for her art soldier skills. If she said it out loud, she'd expose her biggest secret, the copy system. So Lin Xiao could only tell there's no real trick. Just careful observation is enough. Though Shuang looked skeptical hearing this, a sea king remains a sea king. The cat had held its front paw in pain, so she guessed it might be injured. Sure enough, after Lin Xiao's upgraded round of persuasion, Miss Shuang actually believed it. She sighed that it was her lack of skill. In the end, the two had a pleasant conversation in a friendly atmosphere. At times like these, Lin Xiao didn't forget her goal, to copy Shuang's healing art. After gaining Shuang's permission to consult her anytime about the art, the two waved each other goodbye. Just then, Shuang hadn't gone far when the sister-in-law appeared again. Her first question was to ask Lin Xiao if she'd been flirting again. Hearing that, Lin Xiao knew this was a death trap question. Saying no wouldn't work. Saying yes was even worse. Best to change the subject. The next second, just as the sister-in-law was about to unleash her art, Lin Haiwang suddenly used his ultimate move. He took out the hairpin gifted by the imperial consort and presented it to his sister-in-law. At that moment, seeing her sister-in-law's expression change, Lin Xiao immediately changed tone and expression too, quickly piling on a wave of flattery. She completely stunned the sister-in-law. The sister-in-law's face turned red with shyness, and she kept shaking her head, saying the gift was too expensive. She couldn't accept it. Seeing this, Lin Haiwang knew his plan to change the subject had worked. He immediately put the hairpin away, thinking it was such a useful prop that he'd use it again next time. At this moment, the sister-in-law's emotions had reached their. Seeing Lin Xiao put the gift away again, she got so mad she snatched it back, then gave herself an excuse, saying she'd just hold on to it for her sister. Early the next morning, Lin Xiao arrived at Jiayue Pavilion. Just a few hours in, she had already finished the day's work. She marveled at how much yuan energy she'd absorbed lately, and how much her power had improved. Even her healing had become much faster now. Suddenly, two burly men, each 2 meters tall, appeared. They startled Lin Xiao. She was just about to blurt out a bunch of pleas for mercy, when the two men grabbed her from both sides, and dragged her to Tianxiang Pavilion. At that moment, sitting opposite Lin Xiao was the boss of Tianxiang Pavilion. From their conversation, it was clear the boss had invited Lin Xiao to discuss a deal about healing soldiers. She planned to poach Lin Xiao from Jiayue Pavilion, with double the salary. Originally, Lin Xiao was firmly against young people job-hopping recklessly, but after hearing the offer, she nodded in agreement without hesitation. However, once the boss of Tianxiang Pavilion learned that Jiayue Pavilion only paid Lin Xiao 5 taels per soldier, she nearly spat in Lin Xiao's face. If that were the case, would she need to pay 10 taels per soldier? Of course, she wasn't willing. And so, the tone of the negotiation shifted. The boss of Tianxiang Pavilion stood firm on offering just 2 taels. She even tried to pressure Lin Xiao by invoking her backer, the Yongping marquis residence. But Lin Xiao's muscleman had always failed evaluations, not even knowing which card was which. So of course he ignored her. He turned and walked right out. As soon as Lin Xiao left, the young master of the Yongping marquis residence told the boss to settle this matter properly. Don't end up like that loser Qin Kong, or else Qin Song's downfall yesterday would be hers tomorrow. Among all the trades, he was the king of fake injury scams. Anyone who crossed him either had a ruined home or ended up rotting in prison. Early that morning, after bathing and burning incense, Lin Xiao was preparing to enter the palace to continue treating the consorts and concubines. Just as she was about to get on the carriage, suddenly, an elderly man with white hair and beard was sprinting toward her at 80 miles per hour. The next second, about 10 meters away from Lin Xiao, he performed an elegant chang'e flying to the moonfall, but failed mid-flight, and landed with an overly dramatic pose. He very deliberately fell to the ground, while grabbing Lin Xiao's pants. Immediately after, he started yelling at the top of his lungs, successfully drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. His movements were so smooth and practiced that it was obvious he had years of experience. If he competed for an Oscar, he'd definitely win a golden statue. At this point, even Lin Xiao was dumbfounded by the old man's ambush. She truly hadn't expected that even in another world, she'd still run into a scammer pulling the fake fall trick. At this moment, a trace of familiarity surged in Lin Xiao's heart. He wondered if this old man had crossed over with him. Before Lin Xiao could fully process it, 2 bailiffs approached from across the street. Robust, Dolly immediately stepped forward to block the bailiffs, explaining the entire incident to them. Faced with the old man's scam and the timely arrival of the bailiffs, Lin Xiao seemed to understand something. Yesterday, Lin Xiao had rejected Tianxiang Tower and today, someone set a trap for him. Lin Xiao immediately realized this incident was Tianxiang Tower's move against him. After figuring it out, Lin Xiao simply stood there, watching their performance. At this moment, no matter how Dolly explained, the two bailiffs ignored him completely. Just as Dolly was about to lose his temper, Lin Xiao kicked Dolly, calming him down. He told Dolly to go back and wait for news. If someone came looking for him, tell them he had been taken to the East City Bailiff office. With that, he voluntarily confessed to the two bailiffs and willingly followed them to the East City Bailiff office. Hearing this, the two bailiffs were caught off guard, feeling this task was too easy, making them uneasy about taking the money. Half an hour later, Lin Xiao was locked up in the East City Bailiff office's prison. Lin Xiao's case was handled without even a basic investigation or any questioning. He was directly taken to a cell and locked up. At this moment, Lin Xiao found it quite novel. In his 2 lifetimes, this was his first time in jail. While Lin Xiao was still admiring the cell's decor, a series of footsteps approached. As expected, the Tianxiang Tower boss appeared with the old man, both standing before Lin Xiao. From their conversation, it was clear this old man was hired by the Tianxiang Tower boss, specifically to frame Lin Xiao. Professionals are indeed professionals. To solidify Lin Xiao's guilt, the Tianxiang Tower boss, in front of Lin Xiao, broke one of the old man's legs on the spot, and the old man cooperatively pinned the blame on Lin Xiao. In truth, the Tianxiang Tower boss did all this, ultimately for the weapons business, now offering Lin Xiao a price of 1,000 silver per barrel of weapons, 1/20th of the previous price. If he agreed, he could leave immediately. If not, he'd stay in jail to forge weapons. At this moment, before Lin Xiao could respond, a rush of urgent footsteps approached. Lin Xiao knew someone was coming for him, so he made a bet with the boss, betting whether the boss would get beaten up next. Hearing this, the boss immediately bristled. Halfway through his threats, a shoe flew and hit him squarely in the face. The next second, Li Zongguan appeared before Lin Xiao, gently asking how Lin Xiao was doing, while loudly demanding the door be opened. In the end, the East City guards personally opened the cell door for Lin Xiao. After Lin Xiao walked out, the first thing he did was to verbally spar with the Tianxiang Tower boss. At this moment, the boss still thought his father was nearby, trying to intimidate Lin Xiao with a few words. But then, the East City guards made the son understand what fatherly love like a mountain truly means. From their conversation, it was revealed. Today was the day Lin Xiao was supposed to treat the empresses and consorts for their ailments, but he didn't show up, no matter how long they waited. Left and right, he was nowhere to be found. This infuriated the empresses and consorts, so they sent Li Zongguan out of the palace to find him, and he tracked Lin Xiao down here. At this moment, the Tianxiang Tower boss still tried to use the eldest son of the Yongping to make his case. In the end, he was scolded and beaten by his own father, beating him while lecturing, telling him not to mingle with the... Didn't he see the chief eunuch from the palace showed up? That meant Lin Xiao was someone the emperor valued. How dare he arrest such a person? Was he tired of living, or what? Planning to drag the whole family down with him? A plain-looking princess, an imposing sister-in-law. It's you. Who would you choose? Half an hour ago, Lin Xiao was still admiring the jail's decor. Half an hour later, she was already in the imperial harem with Chief Li. At that moment in Changchun Palace, the noble consort was nearly melting from the heat. Even with palace maids constantly fanning her, she still felt like she was melting. Suddenly, rushed footsteps echoed. The noble consort quickly asked, "Is Lin Xiao here?" The next second, Chief Li appeared with Lin Xiao in front of the noble consort. Seeing them, the noble consort immediately lashed out, venting all her frustration at Lin Xiao. At this moment, Lin Xiao showcased her masterful social skills. First, she admitted her mistake, but offered no explanation, then immediately presented a surprise. At that moment, the noble consort's attention was successfully diverted by Lin Xiao. She now eagerly awaited her little surprise. Soon after, Lin Xiao turned water and watermelon into a watermelon slushy. Seeing that, half of the noble consort's anger vanished. After taking a bite of the dessert, a chill spread through her whole body, and the remaining anger melted away too. Suddenly, the noble consort found Lin Xiao rather pleasing to the eye, and she got the idea. Why not keep Lin Xiao permanently in Changchun Palace? That way, she could have her favorite cold treats anytime. Hearing this, Lin Xiao's hair stood on end. She immediately refused, because she knew that in the harem, besides the emperor, only eunuchs were allowed to stay. She had just arrived in this world. Her life of passion had yet to begin, and she didn't want to lose her tool already. At that moment, the noble consort doubled down on her absurd suggestion. She told Lin Xiao plainly, "It's just 2 snips. Endure it, and it's done. It's not like you'll die." Hearing that, Lin Xiao immediately dropped to her knees. She suddenly realized this world was way too dangerous. She wanted to return to Earth. Seeing this, the noble consort figured she'd had enough fun. She gave Lin Xiao a way out, and let her go. No one knew how long had passed, but when Lin Xiao left Changchun Palace, her clothes were drenched in sweat. She had barely avoided turning from young Master Lin into little eunuch Lin. She and Chief Li hadn't gone far before they were stopped by maids from Reup Palace. Upon asking, they found out Reup Palace also needed healing that day. Seeing the situation, Lin Xiao guessed that since Princess Mingi liked heat and hated cold, the ice was probably just for the maids. Not long after, Lin Xiu once again met Princess Mingi. After greeting the princess, Lin Xiu kept her head low and behaved humbly, not even daring to look up. At that moment, the princess looked Lin Xiu up and down intently. Faced with this kind of princess, he couldn't win in a fight. She didn't dare scold her. At that moment, Lin Xiu thought, one day, once she tames this wildcat, she'll give her a good spanking. Did the sun rise in the west today? The princess actually took the initiative to talk to Lin Xiu. From their conversation, the princess knew Lin Xiu was the son of Earl Pingan and engaged to Zhao Lingjun of the Zhao family. Although the princess praised Lin Xiu's looks, she said his strength was too weak, unworthy of Zhao Lingjun, a real low blow. But to Lin Xiu, strength didn't matter. Being handsome was enough. Besides, if even the princess said so, he must really be outrageously good-looking. At that moment, Lin Xiu first praised his fiancée's beauty and talent, unmatched within the capital. Then he shamelessly accepted the princess's compliment about his appearance. Hearing that, the princess got angry too. She might be straightforward, but she wasn't dumb. How could she not realize that Lin Xiu, while praising his fiancée, was also putting down other women? In the end, the princess finally understood what Lin Xiu was really focused on, so she angrily cursed him and told him to get lost after healing. After another busy day of work, it was already evening when Lin Xiu left the palace. Today his sister-in-law came by carriage to pick him up. The two chatted nonstop in the carriage, gossiping about Princess Ming. His sister-in-law told Lin Xiu that since the princess's ability is fire-based, it counters both of their arts, so she warned Lin Xiu to stay away from her. Then, Lin Xiu started comparing the princess to his sister-in-law. No matter how he looked at it, his sister-in-law was better. Hearing that, his sister-in-law curiously asked why. Lin Xiu frankly told her, though both had their own charms, the princess was dark and short, and with them being around the same age, the princess was just average, while his sister-in-law had way more. Of course, his sister-in-law didn't get what he meant, but any worldly guy on earth would know. At that moment, as the carriage passed halfway, a beautiful melody suddenly drifted in the air. Lin Xiu couldn't help but look around. He saw someone singing from a second-floor window. Looking closer, he realized the figure was yet another rare beauty. Do you have a song in your heart that whenever it plays, it touches the softest part, deep within your soul? Last night's melody touched Lin Xiu's heart the same way, making her crave to hear songs again. So, early this morning, she went to Pear Blossom Pavilion. As soon as she reached the gate, she heard beautiful singing from inside. Upon entering, she found the place packed with people. Lin Xiu found a seat and sat down, listening attentively for a while, though they sang well. Still, something was missing. So, Lin Xiu called over the manager and asked if she could make a special request. The manager told that custom songs were allowed, but each song cost 20 coins. However, the song Lin Xiu wanted to hear only existed on Earth, and clearly no one here knew it. So, Lin Xiu negotiated with the manager. Since no one knew the song, she could first teach it to the singer, then have the singer perform it for her. Hearing this, the manager's alertness spiked instantly. Told Lin Xiu they could only perform songs known by the girls of Pear Blossom. Seeing this, Lin Xiu offered to pay extra, but the manager still refused. At that moment, when Lin Xiu slammed down a hefty gold ingot, a smile instantly spread across the manager's face. Without another word, the manager called for all the girls in the establishment to gather at once. Seeing this, Lin Xiu couldn't help but think, no problem couldn't be solved with money. If there was, it was only because the money wasn't enough. At the same time, the manager explained Lin Xiu's request to all the girls. The girls worried that being alone with Lin Xiu in a room might lead to her getting handsy, taking advantage of them for nothing. Suddenly, a young lady stepped before Lin Xiu, offering to learn singing with her, and inviting Lin Xiu to follow her upstairs. Seeing this, Lin Xiu realized this girl, named Sai, was the same one on her way home last night. Not long after, the two arrived at a private room in Pear Blossom Court. Following traditional etiquette, they settled in. Lin Xiu asked Miss Sai why she wasn't worried that Lin Xiu might have ulterior motives. Hearing this, Sai candidly told Lin Xiu she was among the crowd during the Qingli trial case, watching Lin Xiu's every move. In the end, she praised Lin Xiu as someone who stood up to the powerful, speaking out for justice, far from the lecher others claimed her to be. Hearing this, Lin Xiu felt her face burn with embarrassment. She'd only wanted to make a name for herself at work, not become a champion of justice. Seeing this, Lin Xiu knew the topic had to change. She began teaching Tsai to sing. The song was truly a melody lingering like a dream, twisting and soaring, like high mountains and flowing water, an eagle's cry or a goose's call, stirring the heartstrings. After Tsai finished her song, for some reason, tears had wet Lin Xiu's eyes, stirring memories of people or things she couldn't let go. But Tsai, seeing Lin Xiu moved to tears by a single song, was somewhat puzzled. At that moment, Lin Xiu had achieved her goal for coming here. She arranged with Tsai to return for another session, and was about to leave. Suddenly, Tsai felt a wave of dizziness, her body beginning to sway. The next second, Tsai collapsed to the floor. Seeing this, Lin Xiu rushed to her side to ask what was wrong, but Miss Tsai only said she felt dizzy, unsure what was happening to her. Hearing this, Lin Xiao helped Sai to the bed to sit down. However, the moment Lin Xiao touched Sai's body, the system prompted, skill copying in progress. Lin Xiao was startled, but with the situation urgent, she had no time to wait for the skill to copy. Telling Sai to lie down and rest, she hurriedly ran out to fetch a doctor. After stepping out, Lin Xiao reflected, so Miss Sai's skill was tied to her voice. No wonder. Her singing always left Lin Xiao feeling unusually relaxed. The scene shifted, and Lin Xiao arrived outside the gates of the Imperial Medical Academy. Upon reaching the door, he heard the noble consort roaring inside, saying that if anything happened to her kitten, the entire Imperial Hospital would be buried with it. Hearing this, Lin Xiao felt now wasn't the time to look for Miss Shuang. He was about to turn and flee, but alas, he underestimated his own charisma. After taking just a few steps, he was spotted by the noble consort and summoned inside. With no choice, Lin Xiao turned back, sighing to himself, if being handsome is a crime, then he was guilty beyond redemption. Every woman has her own struggles. Though they may seem glamorous on the surface, who can understand the bitterness behind it? Just moments ago, Lin Xiao braced himself and entered the Imperial Hospital, first paying respects to the noble consort. The consort directly told Lin Xiao her kitten was sick again. Since yesterday, it refused to eat or drink, showing no energy at all. At this moment, Miss Shuang, standing nearby, added, she had given the kitten a full physical examination and found no abnormalities inside or out. Hearing this, Lin Xiao took the kitten and observed it closely, using his art of animal communication to listen. Within moments, Lin Xiao identified the cause. It turned out, the kitten was confined to the palace every day, unable to go out and play freely. Its boredom led to loss of appetite. Thus, Lin Xiao told the consort, the kitten's illness wasn't physical, but emotional. Hearing this, the consort curiously asked Lin Xiao if an emotional illness could be treated. At this moment, Lin Xiao calmly explained to the consort, an emotional illness requires emotional healing. Someone could take the kitten out of the palace to play, to experience a broader world. This way, its condition would improve. Hearing this, the consort's mood suddenly grew somber. She instructed Ling Long to take the kitten out of the palace to play, while pretending she was tired and needed rest. In truth, who could understand the consort's feelings at that moment? Since entering the palace in her teens, she had never left again. The palace was like a giant cage, imprisoning her tightly within. Though she gained wealth and glory, she forever lost her freedom. The scene shifts. The three arrived on the bustling street. Seeing the lively, crowded environment, the kitten's mood instantly lifted. It began frolicking in Ling Long's arms. At this moment, Lin Xiao told Miss Shuang he had gone to the Imperial Hospital to ask her to help treat a patient. Without hesitation, Miss Shuang agreed. So the three headed straight to Lihua Courtyard. Lihua Courtyard was packed with people, most of them there for Miss Tsai. But due to Lin Xiao's situation, Miss Tsai was still bedridden, unable to perform for them. Because they couldn't see Miss Tsai, the crowd began to riot. The loudest among them was Wu Gongzi, the Tianxiang Tower boss. Seeing this, Lin Xiao couldn't help but admire Wu Gongzi. He had just been thoroughly beaten by his father, yet recovered so quickly. It made Lin Xiao wonder if his art was some kind of recovery technique. At this moment, Wu Gongzi also noticed Lin Xiao. This startled Wu Gongzi tremendously, nearly losing control of his bladder. Lin Xiao, seeing the situation wasn't ripe enough, stepped forward and whispered a few words to his father. Before the words fully landed, Wu Gongzi ran off, crying and calling for his mother. Seeing this, Miss Shuang giggled cluelessly, but the surrounding crowd fell eerily silent. Seeing the famous young master Wu scared off, they realized Lin Xiao wasn't someone to mess with. Soon after, everyone found their own excuse and quietly left Lihua Courtyard. Peace returned once again. Cut 2. The three of them entered Kai Yi's room on the second floor. Shuang immediately performed a full body check on her. She found that Kai Yi had only fainted. Shuang used her healing art. A few minutes later, after Lin Xiao's explanation, Kai Yi learned that Lin Xiao had gone to the Imperial Hospital to specially invite a rare doctor, Miss Shuang, to treat her. At that moment, Lin Haiwang wasn't about to miss a chance to get closer to Miss Shuang. He started flattering her right away, making Shuang blush. Though she was clearly pleased, with everything settled and time running late, everyone went their separate ways. At that moment, only Lin Xiao and Kai Yi remained in the room to thank Lin Xiao. Kai Yi promised that from now on, whenever he came to Lihua Courtyard, he could listen to songs for free. But Lin Xiao declined. She enjoyed being a generous paying customer. Then Lin Xiao explained the reason for Kai Yi's fainting. It was because she had awakened her art and tried a new singing technique that day. It consumed far more yuan energy than usual, which caused her to faint suddenly. However, Kai Yi felt that her art wasn't of much use. Hearing that, Lin Xiao encouraged her, telling her to train her art well. She wanted her to become the top diva of the capital. After such motivational words, Kai Yi suddenly felt recharged. She immediately asked Lin Xiao how to improve her art. Lin Xiao honestly didn't know. When it came to art, she herself was just a novice. So she promised to visit the art academy next time, to borrow some relevant books for Kai Yi. The two chatted for a while, before Kai Yi reluctantly walked Lin Xiao out. By then, Lin Xiao had already walked far away. But Kai still stood at the doorway, unwilling to leave. Seeing this, the manager of Lihua Courtyard, this young master was clearly no ordinary man. She could tell. Lin Xiao was different from those spoiled nobles. If Kai could seize this opportunity, she might just rise above and become a phoenix. Hearing this, Kai looked a little disheartened. She knew her background as a Lingren didn't match Lin Xiao. All she could do was sing more songs for him. As long as it made him happy, she would be content. Every man has his own type when it comes to women. Take Lin Xiao for example. She liked mature, dominant types. After a month of running around the harem, the weather finally cooled down. That also meant Lin Xiao didn't need to visit the harem for treatments anymore, for now. Today, Chief Li escorted Lin Xiao to the palace, not to heal anyone, but because His Majesty had summoned her. He wanted to reward Lin Xiao for her hard work over the past days. However, Lin Xiao felt a little regretful, because this meant her income from healing was cut off. Not long after, the two of them arrived before the emperor. After paying her respects, Lin Xiao dared not say a word. Even when His Majesty asked what she wanted, she didn't dare answer. She knew the rules. Whatever the emperor grants, you accept. You must never ask for something yourself, or it would count as disrespect. So, Lin Xiao could only wish in her heart. In fact, he wanted a large mansion near the palace. At this moment, seeing Lin Xiao remain silent, Consort Shu suddenly spoke up, saying she would ask His Majesty to grant a mansion near the palace to Lin Xiao. The excuse being that when His Majesty wanted an iced drink, he wouldn't have to wait too long. Hearing this, His Majesty readily agreed, ordering it to be arranged immediately. At this moment, Lin Xiao, having received his desired reward, thanked His Majesty profusely, while inwardly expressing gratitude to Consort Shu. However, what Lin Xiao didn't know was, the scene shifts. Though he lost his job, his wish for a house, Lin Xiao arrived at the art academy. It was his first time seeing so many people skilled in the arts. Some could juggle, some could perform acrobatics, all kinds of arts dazzled Lin Xiao's eyes. He loved every single art, so Lin Xiao decided to copy them all. Suddenly, a gasp rose from the crowd. It was Princess Mingi arriving. Everyone gathered to watch the excitement. To this, Lin Xiao scoffed, muttering under his breath, "These youngsters are just youngsters. They don't appreciate the charm of a mature woman, mistaking a young girl for a fortress." At this moment, Lin Xiao's words were overheard by a stranger, who stepped forward to ask Lin Xiao what a mature woman was. Lin Xiao didn't speak. He only glanced over. The stranger followed Lin Xiao's gaze and looked in the same direction. Sure enough, he saw a stunningly beautiful woman. She was Qing Wang, the most captivating woman in the art academy. Thus, the two began chatting animatedly. As they talked, they realized their tastes in women were remarkably similar. In the end, the two kindred spirits introduced themselves to each other and discovered they both joined the art Skult and Fell Art Academy. Seeing this, the two were a perfect match. After some mutual flattery, 1170. 00 insurmountable obstacles. 26:56, 920. 00:26:58, 080. Some mutual flattery. The two hit it off more and more, ready to swear brotherhood, with a ritual of sacrifice. Suddenly, a wave of hostility spread. There stood Princess Mingi and his little sister-in-law, glaring at each other. Their arts were fire and ice, respectively. No wonder they always clashed, whenever they met. At this moment, Lin Xiao, seeing his little sister-in-law, casually greeted her, only to incur the princess's hostility. Facing the princess, Lin Xiao didn't dare act recklessly. After all, he owed her father for granting him a house from her father's hands. Seeing this, his little sister-in-law, a fierce one, seeing her brother-in-law bullied, immediately shot a glare back at the princess. Seeing this, Lin Xiao couldn't be bothered to mediate, turning to continue his conversation with Li Baizhang. From their talk, it was revealed they discussed the art academy again. Besides Miss Qin Wanner, namely, that Xuan Ninger was the most beautiful. In terms of looks, figure, and charisma, she stood out the most. But it was mostly Li Baizhang talking, with Lin Xiao just listening. She barely knew anyone at the Academy of Skills. At that moment, perhaps their voices were too loud, prompting Princess Mingi to ask, "In the eyes of you people, are women only valued for looks and figure? Is there nothing else?" Hearing this, they answered in unison. The soul too. Suddenly, a woman in the distance turned and left the Academy of Skills. Li Baizhang quickly said goodbye to Lin Xiao and chased after her. In the end, only Lin Xiao and her little sister-in-law remained. They stared at the departing woman. Her little sister-in-law told Lin Xiao that woman was dangerous. Lin Xiao reassured her, promising to stay chaste. How terrifying can a woman's competitive streak be? To win just once, she'd even sacrifice herself. The next morning, Lin Xiao arrived at the Academy of Skills. It was her first day of classes. She ran into Li Baizhang right away. Seeing her, Li Baizhang could hardly believe someone as slight as Lin Xiao had signed up for 5 paths training. In a flash, Li Baizhang seemed to realize something, whispering a flurry of words to Lin Xiao. And just like that, the two rogues revealed their true colors. They began staring at their female classmates, grinning foolishly as they looked. Who knows what they were laughing about? Suddenly, a call to assemble rang out. All the students immediately lined up. Approaching was Instructor Sun. the teacher in charge of 5 paths training. After a barrage of scolding, Instructor Sun declared, anyone who can't handle this hardship can leave now. After 2 minutes with no one quitting, Instructor Sun was very pleased. He issued the first command. Everyone spread out. Remove your shirts and hold a horse stance for 1 hour. Not long after, when everyone had removed their shirts, they discovered Lin Xiao had an 8-pack. Even Li Baizhang cast an envious glance, asking how she trained to get such a great physique. Shameless as ever, Lin Xiao claimed she'd built it by lifting her master and grinding millstones at home. In truth, it was just a side effect of her inspirational skill. Li Baizhang admired Lin Xiao's dedication to training, expressing his approval. However, his fitness philosophy was to follow a stamina-boosting regimen, so he'd never worry about running out of energy. As expected, these 2 rogues were clearly up to no good. No surprise there. At that moment, Instructor Sun suddenly appeared behind them, noting their solid horse stances. He asked if they had any dance experience. Hearing this, Lin Xiao admitted she'd never touched dance, while Li Baizhang had some training. In that case, Instructor Sun told them the next class would involve infusing them with true qi. If they could retain that wisp of true qi in their bodies, they'd be considered dance initiates. The class passed quickly. Most students were utterly exhausted, though the girls' training, as they still had energy to gossip about which male classmates had the best physiques. In the end, several female classmates came to a conclusion. In comparison, Lin Xiao's figure was still the best. Too bad he already had a fiancée, Zhao Lingjun. Otherwise, he'd make a great husband. At that moment, Xuan Ninger suddenly appeared. She didn't seem because in everything before this, she always lost to Zhao Lingjun, whether it was in art or family background. Not even the emperor's favor could compare to him. Upon seeing Lin Xiao, he suddenly had a brilliant idea to steal Zhao Lingjun's fiancée. If he could make Lin Xiao fall for him and abandon Zhao Lingjun, it would mean he'd finally bested Zhao Lingjun at something. The thought alone was thrilling. Unaware, Lin Xiao felt a sudden chill, as if targeted by a villain. Not long after, class ended for the day. Students began leaving the academy. At that moment, as Lin Xiao walked along, a girl suddenly stumbled into her arms. Looking closely, it was Xuan Ning, worthy of rivaling Zhao Lingjun. She flaunted her stunning figure effortlessly. At that moment, Xuan Ninger, blushing, told Lin Xiao she was fine, but inwardly she knew she was starting to steal her partner. People's words are full of deceit. When someone schemes, no one can outmaneuver them. 10 minutes earlier, Xuan Ninger had boldly declared to her friends she'd seduce Zhao Lingjun's fiancé, Lin Xiao. 10 minutes later, she threw herself into Lin Xiao's arms. At that moment, a group of male classmates stepped forward, each eager to help Xuan Ninger. But Xuan Ninger insisted Lin Xiao carry her back, claiming no other classmate's back was as comfortable as Lin Xiao's. This made Lin Xiao blush, while the surrounding boys scoffed. What a flimsy excuse. Suddenly, a female instructor appeared, offering to personally escort Xuan Ninger back. Seeing this, everyone fell silent. They could only watch as Xuan Ninger left by carriage. At that moment, Li Baizhang sidled up, the 2 rogues whispering to each other. Their conversation revealed Xuan Ninger was one of the Academy of Skills 4 jokes, alongside the little sister-in-law, Princess Ningyi, Xingwaner, and Xuan Ninger. However, Xuan Ninger had the most noble suitors. Yet, she only made a move on Lin Xiao, which was quite surprising. Then, learning Xuan Ninger's skill was flight. Lin Xiao was certain she'd become Xuan Ninger's prey. For what purpose? She didn't yet know. This news left Lin Sea Queen fuming, silently vowing to teach Xuan Ninger a lesson, to show her the best hunters often appear as prey. In the end, the 2 rogues felt an instant kinship, deciding the academy wasn't the place to talk. They chose a spot to discuss less than innocent topics, and so, they went to Jiayue Tower to drink and chat. After this drinking session, it was the next morning. Lin Xiao woke up to find herself back home, amazed to realize her legendary drinking capacity from her past life had lost to Li Baizhang last night, knocked out by that guy. After tidying up, Lin Xiao headed to the Academy of Skills library to find a book on enhancing voice quality skills. She hadn't forgotten her top-tier music player, Miss Tsai. Only by upgrading Tsai's voice quality skill could she hear even more enchanting music. Suddenly, Xuan Ninger appeared before Lin Xiao, seemingly determined to win her over at all costs. She came looking for him early in the morning, robust. To deal with this kind of girl, Lin Haiwang's experience was more than sufficient. He first turned to leave, employing a tactic of retreating to advance, planning to let the line run long first. As expected, Lin Xiao sat at the desk, pretending to read. Then Xuan Ninger followed him over. After sitting down, Xuan Ninger immediately struck a captivating pose to seduce Lin Xiao, hoping for a quick victory. But she didn't yet know her art of seduction had already been noticed by Lin Haiwang, making her the prey instead. At this moment, Lin Xiao not only didn't look at Xuan Ninger, but also focused intently on his book. This focus lasted an entire hour, during which Lin Xiao didn't say a word, nor did he glance at Xuan Ninger even once. This completely threw Xuan Ninger off. Before, whenever she used this tactic, every man was utterly enchanted by her. Could Lin Xiao be made of stone? At this moment, Xuan Ninger began to doubt her own charm. In truth, This was Lin Xiu's psychological warfare. He knew Xuanninger had always been a lofty beauty. He needed to bring her down to earth. Only then could they discuss what came next. Otherwise, even if he succeeded by force, she would think it was her charity to Lin Xiu. As expected, Lin Xiu's plan succeeded halfway. Xuanninger had fallen into his trap, so their subsequent conversation was Xuanninger trying every means. She even resorted to provocation to barely elevate their relationship from ordinary classmates to ordinary friends. In the end, though Xuanninger didn't immediately become Lin Xiu's lover, she still took a step forward. She felt this was a good start. However, everything was under Lin Xiu's control. A man and a woman, two cunning foxes, seemed to be chatting happily, but each harbored their own schemes. The next morning, at the art academy, the two kindred spirits met again. But before they could talk much, Xuanninger came looking for him. After the three exchanged greetings, Li Baizhang quietly slipped away. Seeing Xuanninger always seeking out Lin Xiu, Li Baizhang couldn't help but admire Lin Xiu's charm. Only a few days at the academy, and he had one of the 4 campus beauties, Xuanninger, chasing him. Moreover, everyone knew Lin Xiu already had a fiancée, yet Xuanninger was still eager to pursue him. Truly, a good man doesn't know a rogue's luck. At this moment, as the two scheming individuals chatted happily, they were called to assemble by the instructor. Thus, the two reluctantly parted ways. During the lesson, Instructor Sun kept students like Lin Xiu with some foundation, while the rest were sent to run laps. Instructor Sun told the remaining students, true Qi is the foundation of martial arts cultivation. Few can cultivate true Qi on their own. Most need external help. Then came the key point. He would transfer a strand of true Qi into the students' bodies, and the students needed to guide this strand to circulate within their bodies. How long they could retain it depended on their skill. At this moment, Instructor Sun had already transferred a strand of true Qi into Lin Xiu's body, telling him not to resist, and to carefully feel it, and memorize the path of true Qi in his body. Hearing this, Lin Xiu tried hard to sense the true Qi, but unfortunately, not long after, the strand of true Qi dissipated. Yet, Lin Xiu still earned praise from Instructor Sun. He told Lin Xiu that lasting this long on the first try was already quite impressive. With more practice, he should soon be able to step into the martial path. Just then, class break time began. A red-haired guy suddenly bumped into Lin Xiu. He quietly warned him to stay away from Xuanning. Lin Xiu found it odd. He didn't even know this person, so he asked Li Baizhang beside him what was going on. Seeing that, Li Baizhang replied that it was a family arrangement. He told Lin Xiu the guy's name was Wang Wei, son of a 3rd-rank monkey officer, who had only awakened a low-tier spatial ability. More importantly, he had been pursuing Miss Xuanning, but she didn't even like his dad. Hearing that, Lin Xiu was secretly delighted. Though Xuanninger didn't fancy Wang Wei, Lin Xiu was very interested in his spatial art. While Lin Xiu was still thinking how to get physical contact with Wang Wei, Xuanninger suddenly appeared beside him. Upon seeing her, Lin Xiu knew this was his chance to act. He would provoke Wang Wei's jealousy and make him attack him, providing a chance to copy his spatial art during the fight. Sure enough, after saying a few cheesy lines to Xuanninger, Wang Wei couldn't take it anymore. He challenged Lin Xiu to a duel. The wager was, whoever lost would stay away from Xuanning. Hearing that, Lin Xiu agreed with great enthusiasm. At that moment, Xuanninger wasn't too happy, not because she was afraid Lin Xiu would lose, but because of what might happen if he did. If that happened, her plan to steal Zhao Lingjun's fiancé would fall apart, and her wish to make Zhao Lingjun a joke of the capital would be ruined too. At that moment, Xuanninger hated Wang Wei to the core for butting in like that and ruining her whole scheme. Not long after, the two arrived at the schoolyard. Both wielded wooden swords, their eyes full of fighting spirit. However, neither of them had learned any martial arts. It was just brute strength, no skill involved. Then, Wang Wei struck first, aiming straight for the head. The wooden sword came down toward Lin Xiu's head. Such an obvious attack. Even a blind man could block it. Of course Lin Xiu had no problem either. After blocking it, he unleashed his motivational art, the 9th set of radio calisthenics, and smashed Wang Wei's sword down to just a hilt. Before Wang Wei could even react, Lin Xiu returned the favor with the same move, with a loud bang. Wang Wei took a heavy blow to the head. Even his nose gunk flew out. Tried every way to avoid his sister-in-law and flirt around, yet still got caught. Just moments ago, Lin Xiu used textbook radio calisthenics to whack Wang Wei on the head. Though Lin Xiu didn't use much force, Wang Wei still couldn't get up. When Instructor Sun went to check on him, he found he was only unconscious, so he suggested calling for the academy doctor. Hearing that, Lin Xiu couldn't let this golden opportunity slip. He quickly told Instructor Sun not to trouble the doctor. He would carry Wang Wei to the Imperial Hospital himself. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Xiu hoisted Wang Wei and dashed off. His classmates thought Lin Xiu was acting strange, but couldn't put their finger on why. However, on the way to the Imperial Hospital, Wang Wei suddenly woke up. Immediately, the two locked eyes. At that moment, Lin Xiu's copy progress had already reached 73%. Without hesitation, Lin Xiu struck again, knocking Wang Wei out with a single hand chop. Then, dragging Wang Wei along, she strutted off like a triumphant hero. As she walked, she muttered. No one is interrupting my USB transfer again. After reporting in, the two arrived at the Imperial Medical Office. After examining Wang Wei, the doctor told Lin Xiao, just change the bandages again in the afternoon. But for the neck injury, they needed a bone-setting specialist to help. After the doctor left, Lin Xiao started playing with the spatial art she just copied. She treated the spatial art like a travel suitcase. She figured from now on, she'd never need to carry bags again. At that moment, Miss Shuang suddenly walked in. After greeting each other, Lin Xiao explained why she came to the Imperial Medical Office. Finally, seeing there was still time, Lin Xiao suggested that Miss Shuang teach her pulse diagnosis. In truth, Lin Xiao just wanted an excuse to copy again. Naive Miss Shuang never suspected Lin Xiao had other motives. So, Lin Xiao and Miss Shuang sat down at the table together. Shuang told Lin Xiao that pulse types include food pulse, dust pulse, abdominal pulse, tree pulse, each with distinct characteristics. As she spoke, she offered her hand to Lin Xiao, asking her to check her pulse and describe what she felt. She planned to explain everything in detail. Wasn't this like offering herself to the wolf? Seeing this, Lin Xiao couldn't help but giggle to herself. She immediately placed her pig trotter onto Miss Shuang's delicate hand. Sure enough, a system notification popped up. At that moment, the two continued chatting away, but the copy progress stayed frozen at 0%. Now it was Lin Xiao's turn to be speechless. She waited and waited, but nothing changed. Immediately, Lin Xiao started panicking. Was her memory full? Or maybe her system had crashed. Her golden finger just stopped working? At this point, Lin Xiao was furiously churning her Pentium 3 brain. Finally, after a full tease time of processing, she realized her assumptions had been wrong. Turns out, what she thought was an external cheat system was actually her own awakened art. In fact, copying was the very art she had awakened. Since it was an art, it had to be refined and upgraded, just like any other ability. Now that she couldn't copy, it meant her art had reached its current limit. After figuring it out, Lin Xiao stopped worrying. She planned to wait until her next awakening before trying to copy Shuang's art again. Then, to thank Miss Shuang for teaching her, Lin Xiao affectionately held her hand, massaging it while expressing her thanks. Suddenly, a chilling sensation hit from behind. Lin Xiao instantly realized something, letting go of Miss Shuang's hand and standing up. As she turned around, sure enough, it was her sister-in-law. So that's how it is. The sister-in-law was worried Lin Xiao would get hurt in the duel, so she rushed over on purpose. But she ended up finding Lin Xiao flirting instead. She was truly infuriated by Lin Xiao. She couldn't afford to let her guard down even a little when it came to him. Cut to the next scene. On a hospital bed at the Imperial Medical Bureau. When she woke up, both her head and neck hurt. Her neck hurt too, but she clearly remembered getting hit on the head. So why was her neck hurting? Once again, the sister-in-law caught her brother-in-law in the act of doing something shady. Just moments ago, Lin Xiao had chased her out of the Imperial Medical Bureau, chasing while explaining. She was only learning meridian manipulation from Miss Shuang. Hearing this, the sister-in-law stopped and asked Lin Xiao to swear that what she just said was all true. In fact, back on Earth, Lin Haiwang had dealt with this kind of situation many times before. According to the script, Lin Xiao should first swear to the heavens. Then, when she was about to mention the punishment she'd suffer, the sister-in-law would cut her off in time. Lin Xiao would then continue, and finally say that she believed Lin Xiao. That's how the script usually went. But this time, the sister-in-law broke the pattern. She actually let Lin Xiao finish the oath. Seeing that, Lin Xiao had to remind her little sister-in-law, don't we even have this bit of basic trust between us? Not even that. At that moment, the sister-in-law saw Lin Xiao hesitating to swear, which only proved Lin Xiao was guilty. Her anger was almost enough to set her clothes on fire. Right after that, Lin Xiao suddenly realized this was a perfect opportunity to break off the engagement and run free. With that in mind, Lin Xiao did a complete 180 in attitude, grudgingly admitted she just wanted to hold a girl's hand. Narration. The sister-in-law scolded Lin Xiao for being shameless. She remembered Lin Xiao promised she would remain chaste and proper. But then again, Lin Xiao didn't used to be like this. She used to tell everyone about her engagement to Zhao Lingjun, as if to announce it to the world. But now, she's flirting with everyone, even thinking of breaking off the engagement. Mid-argument, suddenly, the sister-in-law seemed to realize something. She asked if Lin Xiao had someone she liked. Narration. To break off the engagement, Lin Xiao was ready to go all in. Since her sister-in-law provided the script, she might as well go along with it. She immediately replied that she already had someone she loved, and they were madly in love with each other. Narration. The sister-in-law, even seriously, analyzed Lin Xiao's recent movements. She had tracked how many times Lin Xiao had visited Lihua Courtyard. Everything was clear to her. She suspected Lin Xiao had fallen for a performer there. Narration. Lin Xiao immediately nodded and said yes. Since the sister-in-law already came up with the story, she didn't need to make up anything. No need to waste her goodwill, after all. Narration. The sister-in-law loudly scolded Lin Xiao. How could some stage performer compare to your fiancé? Lin Xiao responded. You just don't understand love. When you really love someone, they're all you see. Even if it's Zhao Lingjun, even a celestial maiden from the heavens, in front of the one you love, she'd still falter and lose. Just as the words fell, the sister-in-law fired off two soul-searching questions. Since you have a beloved, why did you touch that female physician's hand? Since you have a beloved, why are you still at the art academy? Getting jealous over Xue Ninger with others? Hearing this, Lin Xiu was surprisingly unable to retort. He could only weakly tell his little sister-in-law. In truth, he liked all three of these girls. As expected, his little sister-in-law gave a cold sneer, asking if Lin Xiu liked every pretty girl he saw. With no choice, Lin Xiu continued. He just wanted to give every beautiful girl a warm home, that's all. In the end, his little sister-in-law ruthlessly exposed Lin Xiu's lies. If he liked every pretty girl, how could he not like her sister? He must just want to indulge himself before marriage. At this moment, Lin Xiu wanted to explain further, but facing his little sister-in-law's overactive imagination, he was already powerless to argue. He could only listen to her warn him again about his flirtatious behavior. As the two walked away, Wang Wei emerged. She walked while thinking. She had fought with Lin Xiu. Her head was hit. So why was her neck the most painful? Not long after, a carriage slowly approached Wang Wei. Wang Wei didn't board the carriage. She stood respectfully beside it, reporting the details of her interaction with Lin Xiu today to the person inside. The scene shifts. Lin Xiu was soaking in a bath at home, while mentally reviewing all the arts he had acquired, summing it up in one sentence. Strength didn't matter. Being handsome was enough. In the end, he still considered his safety, deciding to help his bodyguard Dolly improve his martial prowess, while he himself needed to be extra cautious of his little sister-in-law. If he got caught copying arts again by his little sister-in-law, he might be done for. Failed 20 times. A full 20 times. What kind of trash talent is this? Early in the morning, Dolly, carrying a box full of silver, followed Lin Xiu like a lackey, strolling through the streets. Lin Xiu was looking around, as if searching for something. It turned out, he was looking for a reliable martial arts dojo. After some time, Lin Xiu finally spotted one. A very grandly decorated dojo. Not long after, the two arrived at a dojo named Giant Eagle Dojo. Seeing such an imposing gate, its strength was evident. At this moment, Lin Xiu saw the price list at the entrance. Besides the discarded oak wood mentioned, there were even monthly and annual memberships. Most bizarrely, they offered massages and back scrubbing services. This was practically a sauna leisure club. After reading it, Lin Xiu fell silent, with a mindset of making the best of it. Thus, the two mustered their courage and walked in. And you wouldn't believe it. The dojo was indeed a proper martial arts dojo. Some practiced punches, some practiced kicks. All 18 martial arts were being trained. Observing these people's martial prowess, Lin Xiu finally understood why they say the combat power of local martial artists could rival an artist awakened 5 times in a contest of equals. Suddenly, the Great Tang manager approached to ask the two their purpose for coming. Hearing this, Lin Xiu bluntly said they were here to train, and they had brought the silver. Seeing this, the Detang manager led Lin Xiu and her companion into another room. As soon as the door opened, they saw a huge, lying peacefully on the floor, its yellow and black stripes, tail like a steel whip, and the Big Wang character on its head gave off a fierce and mighty aura. It was the first time they'd seen such a large tiger, causing both Lin Xiu and her companion to tremble with fear. Turns out, this was the pet of the master of the Falcon Pavilion. As long as people didn't provoke it, the tiger wouldn't attack on its own. At that moment, the Detang manager was reporting their purpose to the pavilion master. After listening, the pavilion master waved his hand, signaling that Lin Xiu and her companion could leave. He wasn't in the mood to do business today, because his tiger was sick, and he had to take care of it. Upon hearing that, the manager was about to ask them to leave, only to realize that Lin Xiu had vanished. The next moment, Lin Xiu was already in front of the tiger, activating her bestowal art. She listened carefully for a while, and discovered the tiger had a bone stuck in its throat, and it couldn't get it out on its own, causing extreme discomfort. After confirming it, Lin Xiu told the pavilion master that she could heal the tiger. Seeing him nod in agreement, Lin Xiu continued, saying based on her years of veterinary experience, the tiger just had a bone stuck in its throat. All it needed was to open its mouth and have the bone removed. As soon as she finished, Chen Xiong suddenly stepped forward, pried the tiger's mouth open, and climbed halfway inside to search. Sure enough, a moment later, the pavilion master really pulled out a bone. Seeing the tiger back to normal, the master was overjoyed. Then, after thanking Lin Xiu, he immediately agreed to help them with their energy guiding ritual. Seeing that, Lin Xiu didn't forget etiquette, and signaled Dolly to present the token gift they brought. Upon seeing it, the pavilion master, being a man of character, understood the rule. If you show me an inch of respect, I'll return a yard, he boldly declared. This energy guiding session, he would do completely free of charge. He vowed to help until success. At this moment, Lin Xiu truly realized what it meant to have a skill to rely on. Just listening to the tiger speak saved her hundreds of silver taels again. Once Miss Haidang gets her freedom, they'll open a funeral clothing shop together and rake in the money until their hands cramp. After dreaming of riches, Dolly still didn't move. Lin Xiu was furious and ordered him to hurry up and receive the energy guidance. Only then did Dolly realize the main purpose of coming here was to guide energy into himself. Not long after, Dolly successfully entered martial cultivation in just one energy guiding session. Even the pavilion master had to admire his talent. It was just a pity he came too late. If only he had come 20 years earlier, he might have surpassed even the pavilion master. In the end, seeing how easily the ritual succeeded, and how talented his follower was, the pavilion master assumed this young lord must be even more gifted, so he offered Lin Xiao a free energy guiding session too. Hearing that, Lin Xiao, not one to pass up a freebie, readily agreed. And so, something happened that made the pavilion master regret his words. Who knows how long passed, Lin Xiao finally stepped into the martial path. After the lobby manager saw Lin Xiao and her companion leave, the hall master still hadn't emerged. The manager entered the room to check, only to learn the hall master had tried 20 times to help Lin Xiao succeed, now slumped exhausted in a chair, his body clearly drained. Training with her little sister-in-law, Lin Xiao was pushed so hard, she nearly swore off-worldly disease. The next morning, Lin Xiao trained alone at the academy. With one punch, a whirlwind laced with icy energy surged forward at 80 pulses per hour. Though not as devastating as her little sister-in-law's power, it was decent enough. Once she achieved breakthrough development and gained godly gear, her little sister-in-law wouldn't stand a chance. Then she could do whatever she pleased. At that moment, while Lin Xiao was lost in her fantasies, her little sister-in-law suddenly appeared. Seeing Lin Xiao giggling to herself, she knew it couldn't be anything good. At that moment, before Lin Xiao could finish her amusement, her little sister-in-law called her back to reality. Suddenly, Lin Xiao noticed her little sister-in-law behind her, feeling something odd. It wasn't time for indoor training, and no other young ladies were around. So why was her little sister-in-law here? Through her explanation, it turned out the thrice-weekly training sessions were no longer effective for Lin Xiao. Now, she'd take her to another place to aid her cultivation. Hearing this, Lin Xiao was full of suspicion, sensing something amiss. A bad premonition gnawed at her, as if this woman meant her harm. Might is right. And with Lin Xiao's resistance futile, not long after, her little sister-in-law led Lin Xiao to the Tianzi court within the academy. It was said, the Tianzi court housed 10 heavenly instructors, each a genius among geniuses. Lin Xiao, a mere Huangzi court student, felt she shouldn't be allowed in. Hearing this, her little sister-in-law reassured her. She'd already sought the dean's permission, and it was approved. And so, they ventured deeper into the Tianzi court. Not long after, her little sister-in-law brought Lin Xiao to the room where she usually trained. At that moment, standing at the doorway, Lin Xiao could feel a bone-chilling. The room contained a Xianbing bed. Lin Xiao thought sitting on it to cultivate would freeze her to death first. Seeing her hesitation, her little sister-in-law told her to sit by the bed's edge, with no intention of making her lie on it. Relieved, Lin Xiao finally relaxed. Such intense cold was beyond her endurance. At that moment, Lin Xiao saw her little sister-in-law sit on the Xianbing bed, seemingly unaffected. Her curiosity sparked. After sizing it up, Lin Xiao decided the Xianbing bed's chill wasn't as fierce as she'd imagined. Sitting by the edge should be fine. And so, Lin Xiao confidently sat by the bed. Who could have guessed? The moment she sat down, she fully grasped just how potent the Xianbing bed was. The sensation was so intense. It was exhilaratingly overwhelming. At that moment, Lin Xiao had no room for other thoughts, focusing entirely on channeling her energy to resist the cold. After an unknown time, her vital force nearly depleted. Lin Xiao told her little sister-in-law she needed a break to restore her vital force. Lin Xiao finally stepped into the martial path. After the lobby manager saw Lin Xiao and her companion leave, the hall master still hadn't emerged. The manager entered the room to check, only to learn the hall master had tried 20 times to help Lin Xiao succeed, now slumped exhausted in a chair, his body clearly drained. Training with her little sister-in-law, Lin Xiao was pushed so hard, she nearly swore off-worldly disease. The next morning, Lin Xiao trained alone at the academy. With one punch, a whirlwind laced with icy energy surged forward at 80 pulses per hour. Though not as devastating as her little sister-in-law's power, it was decent enough. Once she achieved breakthrough development and gained godly gear, her little sister-in-law wouldn't stand a chance. Then she could do whatever she pleased. At that moment, while Lin Xiao was lost in her fantasies, her little sister-in-law suddenly appeared. Seeing Lin Xiao giggling to herself, she knew it couldn't be anything good. At that moment, before Lin Xiao could finish her amusement, her little sister-in-law called her back to reality. Suddenly, Lin Xiao noticed her little sister-in-law behind her, feeling something odd. It wasn't time for indoor training, and no other young ladies were around. So why was her little sister-in-law here? Through her explanation, it turned out the thrice-weekly training sessions were no longer effective for Lin Xiao. Now, she'd take her to another place to aid her cultivation. Hearing this, Lin Xiao was full of suspicion, sensing something amiss. A bad premonition gnawed at her, as if this woman meant her harm. Might is right. And with Lin Xiao's resistance futile, not long after, her little sister-in-law led Lin Xiao to the Tianzi court within the academy. It was said, the Tianzi court housed 10 heavenly instructors, each a genius among geniuses. Lin Xiao, a mere Huangzi court student, felt she shouldn't be allowed in. Hearing this, her little sister-in-law reassured her. She'd already sought the dean's permission, and it was approved. And so, they ventured deeper into the Tianzi court. Not long after, her little sister-in-law brought Lin Xiao to the room where she usually trained. At that moment, standing at the doorway, Lin Xiao could feel a bone chilling. The room contained a Xianbing bed. Lin Xiao thought sitting on it to cultivate would freeze her to death first. Seeing her hesitation, her little sister-in-law told her to sit by the bed's edge, with no intention of making her lie on it. Relieved, Lin Xiao finally relaxed. Such intense cold was beyond her endurance. At that moment, Lin Xiao saw her little sister-in-law sit on the Xianbing bed, seemingly unaffected. Her curiosity sparked. After sizing it up, Lin Xiao decided the Xianbing bed's chill wasn't as fierce as she'd imagined. Sitting by the edge should be fine. And so, Lin Xiao confidently sat by the bed. Who could have guessed? The moment she sat down, she fully grasped just how potent the Xianbing bed was. The sensation was so intense. It was exhilaratingly overwhelming. At that moment, Lin Xiao had no room for other thoughts, focusing entirely on channeling her energy to resist the cold. After an unknown time, her vital force nearly depleted. Lin Xiao told her little sister-in-law she needed a break to restore her vital force. Hearing that, the sister-in-law asked Lin Xiao in return, which is more important, strength or rest? That question left Lin Haiwang speechless, left with no choice but to drain his last bit of essence, while quietly shedding tears. Thus, Lin Xiao continued her daily battle against the chill of the ice bed. After a few days, her sister-in-law finally molded Lin Xiao into a true ascetic monk. At this point, even when Xuan Ninger tempted her with a boat ride, she withstood the temptation. Next, when Miss Shuang sincerely invited her to discuss medicine, Lin Xiao didn't even glance her way. Finally, the manager of Lihua Courtyard told Lin Xiao that Miss Kai was waiting for her in a room, and Lin Xiao remained completely unmoved inside. At that moment, Lin Xiao finally broke down and cried. Truly, for the first time, she felt what it meant to have the will, but not the strength. These days, whenever Lin Xiao came home, she'd collapse onto the bed and not want to get up, though she was utterly exhausted. Deep down she knew, after enduring her sister-in-law's hellish training, she was only a step away from awakening again, just one thin veil away. Suddenly, a loud voice came from outside, said the sister-in-law had come to find her again. Narration: Lin Xiao jumped out of bed without hesitation. For strength, for the freedom to ride freely. As long as she wasn't dead, she'd train like she was dying. Not long after, when they met, Lin Xiao found out her mother-in-law was returning home to visit family. The sister-in-law had to go along, and her return date was unknown. This news made Lin Xiao so happy, she'd even laugh in her sleep tonight. It was like the tiger returning to the mountains, the caged bird to the tides, the dragon to the sea. Although Lin Xiao was thrilled, her face could only show an obedient, well-behaved expression. In the end, the sister-in-law warned Lin Xiao, while she was away, she better not go around flirting with girls. Otherwise, when she came back, she'd break all of Lin Xiao's buckets. Narration: Lin Xiao wore a saintly look like a true monk, but inside she was wondering, whose name should she draw tonight? The very next day after the sister-in-law left, Lin Xiao flipped over 2 girls' name cards in a row. Early in the morning, on the second floor of Lihua Courtyard, Miss Kai realized she hadn't seen Lin Xiao in quite some time. She deeply missed him, and today, once again, she stood before the window where they first met, hoping that at any moment, Lin Xiao would appear in her line of sight. In truth, as much as she missed him, Kai was also worried that a noble like Lin Xiao was only treating her kindly on a whim, that today he liked Kai, and tomorrow he'd like someone else in blue or yellow. Just as Kai was deep in self-pity, suddenly, a loud door slam was heard, and just like that, Lin Xiao barged into her room. At that moment, Kai looked up and saw it was the one she had been dreaming of, young Master Lin himself, and a smile instantly lit up her face. In the next second, all of Lin Xiao's worries vanished from her mind. Then, with a smile on her face, Lin Xiao took out the book on cultivating sound-based arts that she had promised Aunt Kai. Next, Lin Xiao proudly told Aunt Kai that she made time today just to deliver this book. Upon hearing that, Aunt Kai was moved to tears. She tightly hugged the book, which still carried Lin Xiao's warmth. With tears in her eyes, she asked Lin Xiao how she could ever repay her. Upon hearing that, Lin Xiao suddenly placed her hand on Aunt Kai's fair cheek and said affectionately, "All I ask is that you use your beautiful voice to ease my troubles." Aunt Kai immediately blushed and her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm because she suddenly remembered, although they had known each other for a while, she still didn't know Lin Xiao's name. At that moment, Lin Xiao realized the romantic mood had been ruined, so she told her name. Hearing it, Aunt Kai was shocked. She recalled the rumors. So Lin Xiao was the one, engaged to the Zhao family's eldest daughter. At that moment, Lin Xiao was surprised too, to find even Aunt Kai knew about his engagement to Zhao Lingjun. So then, Aunt Kai said with a touch of sadness, that Zhao Lingjun was truly a girl favored by the heavens. Her future was tied to the fortune of the great Xia Empire, so everyone in the empire paid close attention to everything about her. Then, Aunt Kai told Lin Xiao that she had also once wondered what kind of man could be worthy of marrying such a girl. Hearing this, Lin Xiao nonchalantly chatted with Aunt Kai about his marriage, and asked her, now that she knew he was Zhao Lingjun's fiancé, did she think he wasn't good enough for her? At that moment, Aunt Kai's eyes were full of sadness. She thought to herself, what would she do if she never saw Lin Xiao again? But but she still forced herself to say things against her heart, like how Lin Xiao and Zhao Lingjun were a perfect match, a couple blessed by the heavens. At that moment, Sea King Lin, with years of experience with women, clearly sensed Aunt Kai's affection toward him. The next second, he was already planning in his mind where to take Aunt Kai for a romantic outing. But suddenly, his sister-in-law popped into his mind, shattering all his fantasies. As Lin Xiao snapped back to reality, he decided, for now, he needed to grow stronger. Time to complete his 6-god gear set first. Lin Xiao knew, since Aunt Kai already had feelings for him, he had to deal with his sister-in-law first, find a way to send her home, and have the Zhao family cancel the engagement. Early the next morning, during martial arts class, Instructor Sun discovered during a body check that Lin Xiao had already succeeded in energy guidance. At that moment, Instructor Sun was very pleased, because among all the students in his class, Lin Xiao was the fastest to succeed. With that in mind, Instructor Sun immediately considered adjusting Lin Xiao's course schedule. It didn't take long before Instructor Sun instructed Lin Xiao to practice guiding true energy regularly, ideally gathering it into one part of the body. He could also choose a suitable weapon and try to cover it with true energy. And with that, he finished speaking. Lin Xiao chose a dagger and was diligently practicing the techniques taught by Instructor Sun. Suddenly, a person appeared before Lin Xiao. Upon closer inspection, it was none other than Xuan Ninger. It turned out, Xuan Ninger's birthday was in a few days. She would hold a banquet at home to celebrate, so she personally delivered an invitation to Lin Xiao. Hearing this, Lin Haiwang first apologized to Xuan for his cold attitude a few days ago, then accepted her invitation. At this moment, Lin Xiao had already thought of a gift, determined to make it unforgettable for Xuan Ninger. Then, their conversation drifted to Wang Wei. Lin Xiao learned from Xuan Ninger that Wang Wei used to fawn over Miss Qing Wang. Yet this time, he challenged Lin Xiao over Xuan Ninger. This struck Xuan Ninger as odd. Hearing this, Lin Xiao's hair stood on end, feeling this matter was not simple. There must be some hidden secret behind it. Two men both wanted to marry the same woman. Thus, these two men became enemies. Just moments ago, Lin Xiao and Xuan Ninger were deep in conversation when Li Baizhang intruded at an inopportune moment, staring incessantly at the invitation in Lin Xiao's hand. Seeing this, Xuan Ninger promptly stood up and left. Li Baizhang then asked Lin Xiao if the invitation was for Xuan Ninger's birthday banquet. After Lin Xiao confirmed it, at this moment, even Li Baizhang couldn't help but admire Lin Xiao's charm. Hearing this, Lin Xiao brushed it off, thinking every classmate should receive one. As soon as he spoke, Li Baizhang explained to Lin Xiao, the birthday banquet of Duke Shue's precious daughter wasn't something just anyone could attend. Moreover, Xuan Ninger didn't invite just anyone. With so many people in the dance class, Lin Xiao was the only one to receive an invitation. To Lin Xiao, it was just an ordinary birthday banquet, yet Li Baizhang made it sound so grand. So he asked him if Wang Wei had received an invitation. Hearing this, Li Baizhang shared the details with Lin Xiao. It turned out, Wang Wei's father was the Guang'an Marquis, a third-rank marquis. By right, he should have received an invitation. But because he lost a bet against Lin Xiao, even if Xuan Ninger invited him to the banquet, would he have the face to attend? Not long after class at noon, the two kindred spirits paired up again, heading to Jiayue Tower for lunch. As they reached the main gate, Lin Xiao suddenly caught heading toward Tianxiang Tower across the street. Seeing this, Lin Xiao grew curious, but didn't feel right asking directly. So, he tested Li Baizhang, saying they were tired of Jiayue Tower's food, and suggested trying the dishes at Tianxiang Tower. Hearing this, Li Baizhang bluntly told Lin Xiao any other restaurant was fine to visit, but it was best to avoid Tianxiang Tower. Hearing this, Lin Xiao grew even more curious. Li Baizhang could only explain in detail. It turned out, Tianxiang Tower was an enterprise of the Yongping Marquis Mansion. The Yongping Marquis had personally visited the Zhao family several times, seeking to marry Zhao Lingjun, but was rejected by the Zhao family, citing their betrothal to the Lin family. Moreover, the Yongping Marquis held significant power in the capital. The Guang'an Marquis, Zhong Yonghua, Cheng Yiba, and others were his allies. He also controlled the East City Command and the East City Guards. All were under his command. Moreover, with the grudge of stealing a partner, even if Tianxiang Tower's shopkeeper welcomed Lin Xiao, would Lin Xiao dare eat their food, fearing they might poison her? Hearing this, Lin Xiao cheerfully entered Jiayue Tower instead. Not long after, lunchtime passed in a flash. Young Master Wu of the East City Guard, having just finished lunch, left a restaurant, muttering as he walked, saying no restaurant's food could match Tianxiang Tower's. Sadly, after botching the Yongping Marquis's task, he was too ashamed to dine at Tianxiang Tower again. Suddenly, someone appeared before him. It was Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao politely greeted young Master Wu. Seeing her, young Master Wu was startled, quickly assuming a defensive stance, insisting he hadn't provoked Lin Xiao recently, and warning her not to mistake him for someone else. Don't pick the wrong guy. Lin Xiao waved her hand, telling young Master Wu not to worry. She wasn't here for trouble, just to ask a few questions, and then leave. It turned out, Lin Xiao wanted to know who had ordered him to act last time. At the start of the conversation, young Master Wu was stubbornly loyal, refusing to spill, even lying to Lin Xiao, claiming he just frequented Tianxiang Tower for meals, and was close with the shopkeeper. seeing Lin Xiao help Jiayue Tower provide support, stealing all their business. He couldn't stand it, so he acted to teach Lin Xiao a lesson. Hearing this, Lin Xiao saw through him. She realized, without a big move, she wouldn't get any answers. So, Lin Xiao boldly told young Master Wu, tomorrow, the emperor had summoned her to the palace to provide support. She'd break 3 of her own ribs, then tell the palace escorts she'd been gravely injured by young Master Wu of the East City Guard, preventing her from providing support for the palace. Such a simple framing tactic was child's play for Lin Si Queen by age 3. If this couldn't ruin a spoiled noble, what could? Sure enough, the moment she spoke, young Master Wu began to panic. Lin Xiao pressed his nerves further, boldly predicting to young Master Wu he could start preparing his funeral now and enjoy a good last meal. With that, Lin Xiao turned, pretending to walk away. Young Master Wu was completely intimidated by Lin Xiao. He had no connections in the palace, leaving him at Lin Xiao's mercy to say whatever she wanted. He'd have no way to defend himself. Desperate, young Master Wu grabbed Lin Xiao's sleeve, finally confessing it was Yang Xian, the eldest young master of Yongping Marquis, who ordered him. In the end, young Master Wu urgently reminded Lin Xiao, settle scores with the right person. If you want revenge, go after Yang Xian, not me. Chasing a girl requires not just boldness and tact, but thick skin and a knack. As the sun set, outside Shui Guogong's mansion, guests were arriving in droves. Each guest was a notable figure in the capital, their names well known. Their gifts were rare and priceless treasures. At that moment, Lin Xiao arrived at the gate, but was stopped by the gatekeeper, who asked what congratulatory gift she brought. Hearing this, Lin Xiao gave a mysterious smile. At that moment, in the back garden, several young talents surrounded Xuanninger, chatting and laughing together. The atmosphere seemed pretty good. Suddenly, Xuanninger saw Lin Xiao walking over. She immediately stepped away from the crowd and went up to greet Lin Xiao. Seeing the birthday girl today, Lin Xiao played along tactfully and offered a round of flattering words. Xuanninger responded with a polite smile. At that moment, the crowd around Xuanning also followed her over. Someone immediately asked her, "Who is this person?" Upon hearing the name, they thought Lin Xiao was just the son of a third-rank noble and felt he wasn't even in the running for Xuanning. Suddenly, someone recalled that title, son of Ping and Bo, sounded really familiar. They suddenly remembered Lin Xiao was Zhao Lingjuan's fiancé. In an instant, Lin Xiao could see envy flashing brightly in their eyes. Just like that, everyone relaxed. If Lin Xiao already had Zhao Lingjun, he clearly wasn't going to compete for Xuanning or two. No way he'd be interested. So naturally, Lin Xiao and Zhao Lingjun let them do their thing. At least he's not a threat. Everyone fully let their guard down around Lin Xiao now. With Zhao Lingjun as his fiancé, he wasn't competing for Xuanning. Right after that, Xuanninger introduced everyone around her to Lin Xiao. But in Lin Xiao's eyes, these were just ordinary fish in Xuanninger's pond. When she introduced the eldest son of the Yongping Marquis, Yang Xian, Lin Xiao gave him an extra look. After all, Yang Xian had schemed against him twice. He was one of the more dangerous fish in the pond. Although Lin Xiao despised him to the core, he still had to maintain appearances. So, Lin Xiao greeted him with a smile. In return, Yang Xian coldly responded with a polite remark, and their exchange ended there. Next up, the gift-giving segment began. Xuanninger's suitors on site were all boasting about their presents, how impressive they were, how expensive and rare, how they went through 81 trials just to obtain them, and so on. At this point, Lin Xiao admired the gifts from the side, quietly swallowing his, especially when a spirit crystal appeared. Lin Xiao's eyes went wide. Turned out, it was the crystal core of a Tier 5 beast. This high-grade crystal could speed up training and increase awakening chances. At this moment, Lin Xiao couldn't help but admire these rich young men. For the sake of a girl, they really spared no expense. However, while all these were nice, they held little appeal for a young lady. No wonder after seeing them all, Xuanninger didn't look very excited. Seeing this, someone noticed. Lin Xiao came empty-handed. Didn't look like he brought a gift, so they mocked him. At this moment, even Xuanninger thought he'd forgotten the gift. She quickly spoke up to cover for him, saying she'd already received his gift days ago. Hearing this, Lin Xiao didn't expose the lie. He just smiled and told everyone he had prepared another special gift for Miss Xuanninger tonight. Upon hearing that, Xuanninger looked full of anticipation. Perhaps even she hadn't realized her attitude toward Lin Xiao was already starting to differ from the way she treated other men. At that moment, Lin Xiao held up a small firework, then let out a not-too-loud fart into the sky. Everyone thought there would be more to come, but after waiting a full minute with no reaction, the crowd burst into laughter. They thought Lin Xiao's gift was just that one little firework. Suddenly, behind Lin Xiao, hundreds of fireworks shot up into the sky, accompanied by loud explosions. Brilliant fireworks instantly lit up the dark night sky. At that moment, seeing such a scene, Xuanninger could only think, so beautiful, so stunning. She didn't know how else to describe it. At this moment, Xuanninger realized she was already drunk without even drinking. A beautiful young lady. What started as play acting had become real. She actually fell for someone she had intended to mess with. Just moments ago, Lin Xiao surprised Xueninger with a romantic fireworks display. At that moment, everyone at the banquet began talking. All the girls were incredibly envious of Xuening, but those rich young men, each of them looked super jealous. They said, "What's so great about fireworks? They're not even worth that much. At most a few dozen taels of silver." Though the voices weren't loud, Xueninger heard every word. At that moment, the fireworks were still going, but Xueninger's heart was already entirely with Lin Xiao. After shyly thanking Lin Xiao, she said it was the best birthday gift she had ever received. Hearing this, King Linhai wasn't even surprised. He knew, if a woman is still naive to the world, just show her all the beauty in life. If her heart has grown weary, take her to ride a carousel. Lin Xiao had long developed an effective formula. To win over girls, you need romance. If all you do is throw money, you're destined to be the backup guy. At that moment, Xueninger, whether intentionally or not, said, if only Lin Xiao weren't the son of Ping'an Kingdom. The moment she said that, Lin Xiao knew. Another girl had fallen for him, but the timing wasn't right just yet. So Lin Xiao pretended he hadn't heard anything. After that, the two stood there like a couple, quietly enjoying the fireworks show. No one knew how much time had passed until the fireworks show ended. Only then did the crowd slowly disperse. At that moment, for some reason, Lin Xiao and Yang Xian ended up walking together. Yang Xian walked beside him, praising nonstop that Lin Xiao had given a great gift, that Miss Xueninger really liked it, etc., acting like a big bro lecturing his younger brother. Come on, our King Linhai has seen it all. He directly cut off Yang Xian's nonsense and bluntly told him, there's no outsider here, so stop pretending. Yang Xian realized he'd been seen through and simply frowned. Then, from their conversation, it became clear. The incident at Tianxiang Pavilion. Lin Xiao already knew Yang Xian was behind it. Even Wang Wei's challenge in martial arts class was orchestrated by him. Even Qin Xiong causing trouble was arranged in secret by Yang Xian. At that point, Yang Xian still looked full of pride. He calculated that even if Lin Xiao knew everything, it didn't matter, because Lin Xiao had no proof to tie him to any of it. At that moment, seeing Yang Xian still so confident, Lin Xiao wasn't angry at all. With a faint smile, he told Yang Xian, your plan looked decent. But unfortunately, you picked the wrong person to execute it. At that moment, Yang Xian tried to say something polite, to ease the tension between them. That's what they call conflict without breaking. But Lin Xiao didn't care about that. He flashed a hand sign at Yang Xian, and said with disdain. He loved seeing Yang Xian like this. Even though he couldn't stand him, he just couldn't take him down. Strong, Yang Xian finally lost his temper. Among his peers in the capital, he had always been a leader. This was the first time someone treated him like this. He swore silently to take Lin Xiao down. At that moment, Lin Xiao didn't bother with him. He was mumbling with Dolly, walking toward the Shui family gate. Not long after, Lin Xiao had just returned home. He immediately took out the aid crystal Dolly bought for him. Lin Xiao knew in his heart that by provoking Yang Xian today, he would definitely not hold back and strike again. At that time, power would be the only way to protect himself. He had to immediately push for a second awakening. Then, Lin Xiao forced himself into a cultivation state. At that moment, Lin Xiao was continuously absorbing the energy within the aid crystal, strengthen his own aura. No one knew how much time passed, but once the energy inside the crystal was depleted, Lin Xiao woke up again. It seemed one aid crystal wasn't enough to trigger his breakthrough. Luckily, he had prepared well. 4 more aid crystals remained. That should be enough for the breakthrough. The next morning, Lin Xiao walked out of his room. He saw De Huang basking in the sun. After activating his granting skill, Lin Xiao knew De Huang was thinking about where to find a chicken drumstick to eat. Then, Lin Xiao didn't need to speak. He could directly send his thoughts to De Huang. Suddenly, De Huang raised his head and looked around nervously, thinking there was another dog at home. But in the end, Lin Xiao slapped him on the head, telling him it was his master speaking. Right after that, Lin Xiao instructed De Huang to carry out a task for him. If done well, he'd get a chicken drumstick. Hearing that, De Huang's eyes lit up instantly, and saliva started drooling. Judging by how fast his tail was wagging, De Huang had already entered battle mode. After encountering a powerful enemy, this man didn't think of how to deal with it, but instead set his sights on a woman. Early that morning, Yang Xian was sitting at home drinking tea. Suddenly, a subordinate reported that according to his, they had begun full surveillance of Lin Xiao. They found that since returning from the Duke Shui's banquet, Lin Xiao hadn't left the house for 7 days. Only a yellow dog occasionally emerged from the secret chamber. Hearing this, Yang Xian, but deep down he admired Lin Xiao's patience. Even while staying home, he wore a helpless expression. De Huang had already told Lin Xiao someone was watching. Lin Xiao didn't need to guess. It was obviously Yang Xian's doing. It frightened him so much that he didn't dare leave the house. In fact, Lin Xiao had already come up with a bold plan against Yang Xian. Over the past few days, he had just been waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Lin Xiao's eyes lit up. He knew his moment had come. Miss Shuang came to a sudden halt, stopping right in front of Lin Xiao. Seeing this, she asked Lin Xiao immediately if he already knew she was coming. Hearing that, Lin Xiao gave a mysterious smile and asked Miss Shuang if the noble consort had sent her, and if it was about that little cat of hers. Upon hearing that, Miss Shuang was full of question marks. curious how Lin Xiao knew. At that moment, Lin Xiao began his full-level bluffing. According to him, if it were a human who was sick, Miss Shuang could have handled it herself. Therefore, the only thing that could make her so anxious had to be the noble consort, and what the consort needed help with could only be her little cat. That little cat had a heart illness, which couldn't be cured just by leaving the palace once. Hearing this, Miss Shuang was full of admiration for Lin Xiao, praising him for having such a perceptive heart. Even when the patient was just a small cat, he could still empathize and think from their perspective. Miss Shuang felt deeply ashamed. At this moment, Ling Haiwang, facing Shuang's heartfelt praise, remained calm and composed, accepting it all without a flicker. Finally, Lin Xiao told Shuang she needed to pack some things, and asked Shuang to wait at the palace gate. The scene shifts. Lin Xiao slowly opened her back door, and found De Huang was indeed reliable. The back door was truly unguarded. She slipped out to catch up with Shuang. At this moment, Yang Sun's subordinates at the side gate were still diligently keeping watch, completely unaware that Lin Xiao had already slipped out through the back door. Not long after, Lin Xiao arrived at the inner palace and met His Majesty and the noble consort. She greeted them both. At this moment, the noble consort anxiously told Lin Xiao that her little cat was acting strange, refusing to eat or drink again. It had become so weak, and she was heartbroken. His Majesty, standing nearby, was curious and asked Lin Xiao when she had learned veterinary skills. Hearing this, Lin Xiao first responded to His Majesty, claiming she knew no medical arts, only that she had raised cats and dogs, and thus understood some animal behaviors. Hearing this, His Majesty wasted no words, and directly told Lin Xiao that if she could cure, she would be handsomely rewarded. Hearing this, Lin Xiao immediately began treatment. Since the cat's condition was poor, she promptly asked the noble consort for a quiet room. At this moment, as Lin Xiao entered the room, she gave the cat a slap on its rear, causing it to yowl in pain. Lin Xiao then activated her veterinary art, and, through a conversation with that this was no ordinary cat. Its name was Bai Lin, and it belonged to the tiger clan, perhaps because it hadn't spoken with its kind in so long. Bai Lin vented its frustrations to Lin Xiao, tearfully recounting how it was captured, and describing all the grievances it had endured. Finally, after Bai Lin had exhausted itself talking, Lin Xiao promised to convey all its requests. Suddenly, Bai Lin made a small request to Lin Xiao, saying it was rare to meet someone she could talk to. She hoped Lin Xiao would visit often to chat and play. However, Lin Xiao, not one to lose out, told Bai Lin in return that visiting the palace frequently was not impossible, but Bai Lin would first need to help her stage a performance. Thus, the human and tiger began discussing a script in the room. After some time, the room's door suddenly opened. Lin Xiao stepped out, and the noble consort rushed forward to ask how her beloved pet was doing. A man wants to use a woman of status to control another man of status. It sounds a bit complicated, but as Lin Xiao stepped out holding Bai Lin, the noble consort hurriedly. Again, Lin Xiao didn't answer her question, and instead asked the noble consort what she usually fed Bai Lin. Hearing this, the noble consort turned to her palace maid. Immediately, the palace maid replied that they fed it the finest fish slices every meal. As soon as she finished, Lin Xiao gave a detailed explanation to everyone. It turned out that although Bai Lin looked like a cat, she was actually a type of tiger. Eating food she didn't like every day was tolerable for a short time, but over time, as a tiger, Bai Lin had clearly lost all interest in such food. Thus, the noble consort immediately what Bai Lin should eat. Lin Xiao pointed out, chicken, beef, and such, with some vegetables would suffice. Sure enough, as soon as the food was brought, Bai Lin began eating voraciously, looking quite content. Finally, the noble consort was relieved. With the atmosphere now relaxed, the noble consort suddenly said to Lin Xiao, asking if she really wouldn't. At this moment, Lin Xiao was startled by the noble consort's whimsical idea. She was taken aback, and hadn't yet responded. When His Majesty spoke first, he told the noble consort that anyone could stay by her side, but Lin Xiao absolutely could not, because His Majesty needed Lin Xiao to counter the Zhao family, requiring her to marry Zhao Lingjun. Finally, 332. 00:07:47 120 System. The response was cut off due to length constraints. Below is the continuation of the translated subtitle file, starting from line 332, ensuring all requirements are met, clean content, original timestamps, gender context, and character name. His Majesty came up with a compromise. He would give Lin Xiao a token allowing access to the inner palace, requiring her to visit every other day to care for Bai Lin. Seeing His Majesty's decision, the noble consort reluctantly agreed. Then, the noble consort asked again if feeding Bai Lin these foods would prevent her from getting sick again. In response, Lin Xiao smiled and told the noble consort that Bai Lin's loss of appetite was only partly due to food. The real issue was a matter of the heart, and a heart ailment requires a remedy of the heart. Hearing this, the noble consort told Lin Xiao that she had asked her palace maids to take Bai Lin out of the palace to play often, but it didn't seem to help. At this moment, Lin Xiao could only offer a forced explanation, saying it was because the noble consort was Bai Lin's true master. If the noble consort personally took her out, the outcome might be different. As soon as she finished, Zhu Jin immediately picked up by Lin and scolded Lin Xiao, saying the noble consort was of noble status. If something happened to her outside the palace, who could bear the responsibility? At this moment, the noble consort, seeing the topic shift to herself, was quite intrigued, because she had long wanted to go out and have fun. So, the noble consort strongly supported Lin Xiao's viewpoint, whether Lin Xiao was right or wrong, as long as she could go out. Thus, the noble consort turned and told His Majesty she wanted to personally take Bai Lin out of the palace, nominally for Bai Lin's health. In response, His Majesty reluctantly agreed, and immediately gave Zhu Jin a flurry of instructions. Zhu Jin could only nod seeing this. Lin Xiao hadn't expected to witness the ruler of a nation showing fear of his wife. Immediately, Lin Xiao arranged with the noble consort to meet in half an hour at the entrance of Zhangyue Tower, and went home to prepare. Not long after, Lin Xiao entered her home through the back door again. She immediately went to the front door and called De Huang inside. After a conversation between human and dog, Lin Xiao confirmed that Yang Sun's men were still watching outside. She knew her plan could finally begin. Thus, Lin Xiao walked out openly from his own front gate. The surveillance team saw Lin Xiao finally leave the house and immediately reported to the eldest young master. Not long after, Lin Xiao met with Nyang Nyang at Zhangyue Tower. Seeing that Bai Ling could come out to play and became lively and spirited again, Nyang Nyang was also very happy. In fact, all of this was a plan devised by one person and one tiger in the room. At this moment, Nyang Nyang asked Lin Xiao what they should do next. Lin Xiao bluntly told Nyang Nyang that Lin Chong had been in the palace for too long and was full of pent-up energy. They could start by carrying her for a walk on the street, treating it as a casual stroll. Hearing this, Nyang Nyang was a bit stunned. She had never gone shopping in her life and didn't know how. A man taking a woman shopping is not necessarily for a date. There might be another purpose. Just moments ago, after Lin Xiao met with Nyang Nyang, he carefully explained to her how to go shopping. It's about walking and looking around on the street, buying whatever catches your eye. Women are naturally gifted in this regard. In no time, Nyang Nyang mastered it completely. First, she looked, then she chose, tried it on, and finally bought it. This was Nyang Nyang's first time shopping in her life, and her energy was at its peak. She looked around curiously on the street, feeling intrigued by everything. She wanted to see everything and have everything. At this moment, Zhu Jin, following behind Nyang Nyang, couldn't help but admire Lin Xiao. Though his actions were reckless, by a twist of fate, he had done something good. Zhu Jin knew in her heart that an hour later, Nyang Nyang still looked full of energy. But Zhu Jin was utterly exhausted. She had no choice but to speak up, reminding Nyang Nyang that it was time for lunch, and suggesting they go to Zhangyue Tower to eat. Hearing this, Nyang Nyang didn't object, but Lin Xiao offered a different opinion. She said there was a small restaurant nearby that served excellent Jiangnan cuisine, very authentic. She invited Nyang Nyang to try it. At that moment, hearing it was her favorite Jiangnan cuisine, Nyang Nyang's eyes lit up. Ignoring Zhu Jin's objections, she insisted on going to the restaurant Lin Xiao mentioned. After some time, when the dishes were served, looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar dishes, Nyang Nyang was overjoyed. She started eating with her hands directly. After a few bites, Nyang Nyang paused. It turned out, there were Jiangnan chefs in the palace too. But by the time the dishes reached Nyang Nyang's table, they were always cold. It had been a long time since she tasted such warm, hometown flavors. As she spoke, a hint of melancholy appeared in Nyang Nyang's eye. However, with Lin Xiao by her side, it didn't take long for her to make Nyang Nyang laugh heartily again. But all of this was seen by the people Yang Xian had arranged to monitor them. Sure enough, not long after, Yang Xian received news that Lin Xiao was shopping and dining with a beautiful woman. What puzzled Yang Xian was that Lin Xiao was already engaged to Zhao Lingjun. Normally, when someone is betrothed to a prominent family like the Zhao clan, they would be extremely cautious. Yet Lin Xiao still dared to flirt around. At this moment, Yang Xian didn't have time to figure out what was going on, and immediately ordered his subordinates to take action. The scene shifts to the private room on the second floor of Lihua Courtyard. Miss Tsai was playing the pipa and singing a song. After the song ended, Nyang Nyang couldn't help but sigh that the song carried a strong Jiangnan flavor. It had been over 10 years since she last returned to her hometown. At this moment, Lin Xiao was chatting with Nyang Nyang by her side. Through their conversation, it was revealed that all of this was deliberately arranged by Lin Xiao for Nyang Nyang. Having interacted with Nyang Nyang a few times, Lin Xiao noticed that when Nyang Nyang spoke, she occasionally had a Jiangnan accent. So, she guessed that Nyang Nyang was likely from Jiangnan. However, what puzzled Nyang Nyang was that Lin Xiao, a native of the capital, could recognize a Jiangnan accent. Hearing this, Lin Xiao could only dodge the question by saying she had some friends from Jiangnan before, which is how she recognized it. In the end, Nyang Nyang felt she had an especially joyful day. 532. 012 out of 5 stars. A happiness she hadn't felt in years, though it was all arranged for her by someone. Still, Nyang Nyang subtly expressed her gratitude to Lin Xiao. Hearing this, Lin Xiao didn't know what to say. While doing all this, she also had her own motives, using Nyang Nyang as a shield, hoping that when Yang Xian came after her, Nyang Nyang would get involved too. That way, someone would deal with Yang Xian later. After the performance, Nyang Nyang not only felt much better, but even Bai Ling felt much more relaxed. So, Nyang Nyang prepared to leave, instructing Lin Xiao to visit the palace often to chat with her and look after her spirit insect. Hearing this, Lin Xiao quickly agreed, as it suited her intentions perfectly. However, what puzzled Lin Xiao was that she had been out with Nyang, yet Yang Xian still hadn't made a move against her. This guy, playing schemes and tricks, had even played them on the Emperor, and fooled the Emperor twice. It was simply too impressive. An hour earlier, Lin Xiao had invited Nyang Nyang to go shopping. After they finished a private concert on the second floor of Lihua Courtyard, as they went downstairs, Lin Xiao walked and thought. At Xianing's birthday banquet, she deliberately provoked Yang Xian, hoping to goad him into acting against her now. If Yang Xian realized the imperial consort was by her side, and didn't dare to act against her, then she wouldn't know when the next chance would come. Just as she thought this, suddenly, a few thugs appeared, blocking Yang Yang's path. Seeing this, Lin Xiao's expression changed. She knew these were Yang Xian's men sent to deal with her. At that moment, the thugs shouted disrespectfully, saying Yang Yang was beautiful, and that following a pretty boy like Lin Xiao was worse than following them, with some crude remarks. They even tried to make a move on Yang Yang. The next second, Lin Xiao stepped in front of Yang Yang, firmly grabbing the outstretched hand. Unable to break free, the thug kept cursing, trying to intimidate Lin Xiao with words. But Lin Xiao wasn't fazed by this. Without wasting words, she gathered her strength and slapped the thug across the face, sending his teeth flying. At that moment, two of the thug's companions caught him from behind, calling him Big Brother out loud, but knowing in their hearts that the thug had completed his task, sneaking to a spot where Lin Xiao and the others couldn't see, someone suddenly struck the thug with a palm. The thug's eyes bulged, his pupils filled with bloodshot veins. The next second, the thug's head tilted, and he died on the spot. Seeing this, the thug's two companions immediately shouted that their boss had been killed. At the same time, several constables happened to walk in through the main gate. As soon as they entered, they asked who the murderer was. At this moment, even the noble consort and Zhu Jin sensed something was off. Too many coincidences happening at once were no longer coincidences. Hearing this, the thug's two companions pointed at Lin Xiao, telling the constables that Lin Xiao was the murderer. Meanwhile, the constables, without even asking questions, ordered their subordinates to take Lin Xiao away. Seeing this, Lin Xiao could only tell the noble consort that it wasn't safe outside, and urged her to return to the palace. Those unaware of the truth, seeing Lin Xiao's innocent expression, might think she was just an innocent victim. In reality, Lin Xiao was the director of this entire act. As expected, the noble consort, seeing danger arise, and Lin Xiao still thinking of her, was deeply moved by Lin Xiao's concern. At this moment, the noble consort, reluctantly walking away, instructed Zhu Jin to inform His Majesty immediately upon returning, and ensure Lin Xiao received justice. The scene shifts. Inside the palace, Zhu Jin was reporting to His Majesty, detailing everything that happened today. After Zhu Jin finished, the two began chatting animatedly. At this moment, His Majesty had completely seen through all of Lin Xiao's intentions. He explained to Zhu Jin, revealing that Lin Xiao had used the matter of the spiritual pet to trick the noble consort into leaving the palace. The unsuspecting noble consort became both a witness and a shield for Lin Xiao's framed predicament. Sure enough, as soon as she returned, she sent Zhu Jin to His Majesty, demanding justice for Lin Xiao. Not just this time. The last time His Majesty summoned Lin Xiao to treat soldiers, she was thrown into jail. In truth, if Lin Xiao had simply said that His Majesty had summoned her to the palace, who would have dared to arrest her? From these two incidents, it's clear that Lin Xiao is quite cunning and extraordinarily bold. Even His Majesty and the noble consort are part of her calculations. Hearing this, Zhu Jin was understandably furious, his attitude shifting completely. Not only did he stop pleading for Lin Xiao, he now demanded that His Majesty punish her. But just as Zhu Jin finished speaking, a kick landed squarely on his lower back. Before Zhu Jin could see who it was, he heard the noble consort's icy voice, saying that these people, always scheming and plotting, were full of their own conspiracies. How could they see everyone as a villain in their eyes? At this moment, not only did Zhu Jin dare not retort, even His Majesty remained silent, seeing both of them quiet. The noble consort told His Majesty that she really liked Lin Xiao, this young woman, and didn't want her to suffer the slightest grievance. Hearing this, His Majesty could only nod in agreement, and immediately ordered Zhu Jin to go to the East City Constabulary at once, and get Lin Xiao released. Seeing the matter resolved, the noble consort turned and left gracefully. After the noble consort left, Zhu Jin, still uncertain, asked His Majesty how to handle Lin Xiao's case. In response, His Majesty could only tell Zhu Jin that although Lin Xiao was young, she was exceptionally shrewd, and free of the vices of spoiled nobles. Most importantly, he was confident in Lin Xiao marrying the Zhao family's prodigy, Zhao Lingjun. If Ling Haiwang hadn't won a certain woman's favor this time, he might have been outmaneuvered by Yang Sun and beaten soundly by his men. Half an hour earlier, after parting with the noble consort, Lin Xiao was taken to the East City Constabulary. As soon as she entered the constabulary's gates, Lin Xiao ran into her old friend, the East City Guard. the East City Guard looked utterly helpless, having just received orders from above to personally handle this case. Initially, she didn't think much of it, but upon seeing it was Lin Xiao, her face contorted as if in distress. At this moment, the East City Guard tactfully expressed to Lin Xiao her frustration after it fell to her. Lin Xiao simply waved her off. Seeing this, the East City Guard, a seasoned official, immediately realized the case was far from straightforward. Lin Xiao was clearly signaling her to stay out of it. Suddenly, the East City Guard shouted that her stomach hurt terribly, and she needed to use the latrine. She also instructed her subordinates to inform the East City Magistrate that she was unwell today, and the case should be handled by the magistrate himself. The scene shifts. A gavel struck with a resounding thud, and the East City Magistrate began the trial in the courtroom. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao showed no trace of panic, engaging the magistrate in a sharp exchange. She stood her ground, trading barbs, both sides going back and forth lively. Through their dialogue, it was revealed that this case involved a human life, and the East City Constabulary had no jurisdiction to try it. The department with authority was actually Lin Xiao's own Qinli division. However, someone had tipped off the East City Magistrate, leading him to forcibly intervene in the murder case. The magistrate even claimed that handing Lin Xiao over to the Qinli division might lead to her being protected by her own people. It would be best for the East City Constabulary to try the case first, before transferring it to the Ministry of Justice, as that would be fair. Hearing this, Lin Xiao launched into a barrage of mockery aimed at the East City Magistrate. At this point, the magistrate had lost all patience with Lin Xiao and directly ordered severe punishment to make Lin Xiao confess through torture. He declared she'd be beaten until she cried for mercy. But as he threw out his token, a backpack suddenly sliced the token in midair, cutting it in two. The next second, the magistrate was about to berate the audacious intruder when he saw the person wore the uniform of the Secret Needle Division, a unit directly under His Majesty's command. At this moment, the magistrate realized he had made a grave mistake, meddling in a high-level power struggle. He feared he was done for this time. Seeing this, Lin Xiao, ever the opportunist, wouldn't miss the chance to kick a man when he's down. She began rattling off threats to the magistrate. Unfortunately, after the struggle, Lin Xiao, feeling triumphant, turned to greet Zhu Jin, but Zhu Jin gave her no. He bluntly told her that this time, she was saved by the noble consort's protection. If she dared to scheme against His Majesty again, she wouldn't be so lucky. Hearing this, Lin Xiao was startled, realizing her little schemes. All of this was seen through by His Majesty the Emperor. He realized that if this time, he hadn't won the favor of Nyang Yang, he would be the one facing severe punishment now. With things having reached this point, Lin Xiao didn't want to linger any longer. He said goodbye to Zhu Jin and was about to leave the county yamen. Suddenly, Lin Xiao looked toward the source of a smell and saw Lord Dongqing Wei being escorted in by agents of the Secret Needle Division. It turned out this old guy, to avoid the trial of this case, had hidden in the latrine for an hour. However, he was still found by the Secret Needle Division. After thinking for a moment, Lin Xiao spoke up to plead for Lord Dongqing Wei, casually mentioning how Lord Dongqing Wei had helped him earlier. For such a small matter, Zhu Jin was willing to give Lin Xiao face. She directly ordered her subordinates to release him. After all, this guy Lin Xiao was quite favored by the imperial consort Nyang Yang, and His Majesty the Emperor doted on the imperial consort greatly. So, this face had to be given. A playboy spent a lot of effort scheming against a woman, then confessed to her, and surprisingly, even earned her forgiveness. An hour ago, a carriage was timely traveling on the street, heading toward the Yongping Marquis residence. Yang Xian was the eldest son of the Yongping Marquis, and the mastermind behind framing Lin Xiao. After the time of a cup of tea, inside the Yongping Marquis residence, a subordinate was reporting to Yang Xian the entire process of framing Lin Xiao. But when Yang Xian heard half of it, he waved his hand, dismissing the subordinate. Because this wasn't the first time he'd done such a thing, he was quite practiced at it. As for Lin Xiao's final outcome, he could guess without listening. At this moment, Yang Xian was full of ease and joy. He felt he had done Zhao Lingjun a great favor. As long as Lin Xiao was successfully sent to prison this time, Zhao Lingjun wouldn't have to marry a loser like Lin Xiao. The scene shifts. The Yongping Marquis called his eldest son, Yang Xian, to the study. The father and son had a heated debate about framing Lin Xiao. It turned out, the reason Yang Xian framed Lin Xiao was that if he were someone like Zhao Lingjun's prince, or a strong figure like Prince Zhao, then Yang Xian would have no objections. However, Yang Xian's hopes were likely to be dashed. The Yongping Marquis directly told Yang Xian that His Majesty would not allow the two families to break off the engagement. Hearing this, Yang Xian was shocked. Just as he asked why, Zhu Jin walked in with a group of people. Seeing this, the father and son were still confused about what was happening. After Zhu Jin sneered, she began to scold the Yongping Marquis, saying he was wise all his life, but had neglected to discipline his son. He had been truly careless. As her words fell, Zhu Jin ordered her subordinates to seize Yang Xian, giving the father and son no chance to speak. The scene shifts. At this moment, in the rear palace, Lin Xiao once again entered Changchun Palace. At this time, Bai Ling was thrilled to see Lin Xiao. Nyang Nyang also asked Lin Xiao if he had been subjected to torture at the yamen. Upon learning that Zhu Jin had arrived in time to protect Lin Xiao from a beating, she let out a long sigh of relief. Then, Nyang Nyang proudly told Lin Xiao that His Majesty still listened to her words. At this moment, seeing the good atmosphere, Lin Xiao began to confess his mistakes to Nyang Nyang, explaining the entire incident in detail and the little schemes he had employed. After Lin Xiao finished explaining, not only did Nyang Nyang not blame him, she even cursed Yang Xian as a sinister and cunning villain who only knew how to cause trouble behind the scenes. She also praised Lin Xiao, saying he usually seemed a bit dim-witted, but unexpectedly came up with such a plan to stand up against the eldest son of a first-class marquis. Lin Xiao's series of maneuvers made Nyang Nyang grow fonder of this clever young man. Hearing this, even Lin Xiao felt that Nyang Nyang was being a bit too biased. Nyang Nyang didn't understand what biased meant. After Lin Xiao explained the meaning of bias, Nyang Nyang bluntly told Lin Xiao that because Lin Xiao was kind to Bai Ling and to her as well, she had seen it all. So, she considered Lin Xiao one of her own. Since he was one of her own, whatever her own people did was right. Finally, Nyang Nyang arrogantly told Lin Xiao that she would protect him from now on. She also declared that Lin Xiao was now part of Changchun Palace. Whoever bullied Lin Xiao, she would step in to stand up for him. Hearing this, Lin Xiao felt like he was being kept by a noble woman. Then, Lin Xiao whispered something in Bai Ling's ear, and Bai Ling obediently came to Nyang Nyang's side, leaving a kiss mark on Nyang Nyang's face. Seeing this, Nyang Nyang laughed happily. Next, Lin Xiao fully displayed his playboy skills, making Nyang Nyang so happy she was beaming. Bursts of laughter echoed from Changchun Palace. However, all of this was overheard by Princess Mingi outside. She listened to everything. Just because of one woman's words, two men could have a conversation in prison. Just moments ago, bursts of Nyang Nyang's joyful laughter came from Changchun Palace. Lin, the playboy, used all his tricks, making the imperial consort laugh until tears came. Finally, Nyang Nyang was too tired to laugh anymore, and told Lin Xiao to stop talking. In her joy, Nyang Nyang also promised Lin Xiao that she would find a way to elevate his family's noble title, so that no random nobody would dare bully him again. Hearing this, Lin Xiao sincerely thanked Nyang Nyang, and then left Changchun Palace. Suddenly, before Lin Xiao had gone far, he ran into Princess Mingi. The two were naturally at odds, finding each other unbearable. As soon as they met, they started bickering loudly. However, with Princess Mingi's intelligence, out-arguing Lin Xiao was quite difficult. Sure enough, they hadn't argued for long before Lin Xiao's words led the princess astray. When the princess realized, she was furious and chased after Lin Xiao, wanting to beat him up to vent her anger. By this time, the scene shifts. Inside a cell at Qingli Temple, Lin Xiao came to visit Yang Xian, who was imprisoned there, even bringing gifts, showing great thoughtfulness. At this moment, only the two of them were in the cell. After discussion, both were willing to speak openly. Through their conversation, it was revealed that Yang Xian was to be exiled 3,000 miles away tomorrow. It was best to clear some things up here. Their first round of conflict ended with Yang Xian's defeat. It wasn't until he was locked in the cell that Yang Xian finally figured out the whole matter. He finally understood that as early as Xu Wening's birthday, Lin Xiao had already begun setting his plans in motion. He successfully provoked him at the banquet, then stayed behind closed doors for a long time. On one hand, this gave him ample time to prepare, while on the other, it made his mood increasingly anxious. As a result, the moment Lin Xiao stepped out, what method did Lin Xiao use to convince the noble consort to listen? To these words from Yang Sun, Lin Xiao neither confirmed nor denied them. He simply told Yang Sun calmly, "Does any of that matter now?" Suddenly, both tacitly cursed each other. "You're really quite cunning." Immediately after, Yang Sun asked a question that he couldn't wrap his head around. Namely, in his impression, Lin Xiao had always been a timid, cowardly person. So why, that day at Qingli Temple's hall, did he stand up for a strange woman, even at the cost of offending a powerful noble in the capital? Hearing this, Lin Xiao's heart skipped a beat. He knew he had transmigrated, but this secret was known only to him. He had never told anyone. Who would have thought, who could have imagined, that the first to ask this question would be his rival? At this moment, Lin Xiao fell silent. He had no intention of answering Yang Sun's question. Instead, he told Yang Sun that he had spent some time investigating Yang Sun's character. He found that Yang Sun's reputation among the capital's nobles was widely praised. But why was he so fixated on targeting him? Hearing this, Yang Sun suddenly became agitated, angrily rebuking Lin Xiao, saying he would never find. As soon as the words fell, Lin Xiao finally understood that Yang Sun was actually one of Zhao Lingjuan's devoted admirers. This explained everything. Then, Lin Xiao asked one final question. Was Yang Sun behind the assassin sent to kill him? At this moment, Yang Sun was still forthright, directly admitting it wasn't him. He only wanted to ruin Lin Xiao, never to take his life. With that, Yang Sun burst into hearty laughter, mocking Lin Xiao for not knowing how many people in the capital wanted him dead. Even if Lin Xiao racked his brains, he'd never guess who was out to get him. A woman secretly in love with a man can pretend to know nothing, giving that man an opportunity to act The next morning, Lin Xiao arrived at Lihua Courtyard. Upon reaching Lihua Courtyard, he immediately entered Tsai's room. At this moment, this guy Lin Xiao, under the pretext of checking Tsai's pulse for her art, was shamelessly touching her hand all over. So shameless, it made Tsai blush and her heart race. It turned out that after Lin Xiao's second art awakening, he hadn't had time to examine his art. Today, with some free time, he came to Tsai to conduct an experiment, as expected. However, what frustrated Lin Xiao was that the replication speed was much slower than before, even showing decimals in the calculation. As annoying as a certain game. At this moment, Tsai suddenly spoke up, telling Lin Xiao that she had read in a book that art progress couldn't be gauged through pulse taking. Hearing this, Ling Haiwang was speechless. He couldn't even tease Tsai, who was new to art, anymore. As expected, women should read less. Knowing too much makes them harder to fool. However, Ling Haiwang showed no trace of panic on his face. He decisively changed the subject, asking Tsai why Lihua Courtyard wasn't open for business today. Tsai told Lin Xiao that because of the murder case last time, the authorities had sealed the place. They didn't know when it could reopen for business. At these words, Ling Haiwang immediately found an excuse to leave, saying he'd fight for justice for Lihua Courtyard, and urged the authorities to act. They couldn't let an unsolved case deprive people of their livelihood. Tsai felt too shy. She could only send Lin Xiao off with a forlorn expression. In truth, Ling Haiwang wasn't foolish. He had long noticed Tsai's feelings for him. However, he already had a fiancée, or else he could have won Tsai over in 3 days. The scene shifts. It's now noon. Lin Xiao returned home for lunch, finding his parents as kind to him as ever. Even during meals, they insisted on filling his bowl with food before stopping. Though Lin Xiao had lived 2 lives, only here did he truly feel the warmth of home. So he secretly vowed to protect this family no matter what. During his time after transmigrating, Lin Xiao had come to understand some things. Here, the nobles completely controlled the military, land, and population, holding real power. Thus, over the years, His Majesty, to consolidate imperial authority, had been tightening restrictions on noble privileges. Even under these circumstances, the Zhao family rose from a 3rd-tier state to a 1st-tier marquis, achieving a 5-tier leap in rank, entirely because they had 2 daughters with boundless potential in art. In the end, it all came down to personal strength. Thus, improving one's own strength was of utmost importance. However, high-tier artists could only advance through self-cultivation. But for low-tier artists like Lin Xiao, gold inscription was the fastest method. For example, 1 copper-tier primal gold was worth a day's cultivation, and a breakthrough required at least 10 higher-tier primal golds. By this calculation, inscribing to the 3rd awakening required 800 2nd-tier primal golds and 10 3rd-tier primal golds, with a market value of 100,000 taels of silver. To reach the 4th awakening, it would take 2,000 3rd-tier primal golds and 10 4th-tier primal golds, with a market value of 2 million taels of silver. So, the conclusion was that gold inscription required gold to inscribe. Without gold, what's the point of inscribing? And their family was so poor they were nearly laying off staff. At this moment, Lin Xiao was racking his brain over money troubles. Suddenly, someone walked in from outside the room. Looking closely, it was none other than Li Zongguan. The two were old acquaintances. After exchanging greetings, Li Zongguan produced an imperial edict, calling for Lin Xiao and his father to receive it. As soon as he spoke, the 3 members of the Lin family felt a jolt in their hearts, unsure whether the edict brought good news or bad. Sometimes, a woman's feelings for a man can only be learned through a third party. Just moments ago, Li Zongguan arrived with the imperial edict for Lin Xiao and immediately began reading it aloud. Lin Xiao, son of Ping and Bo, has repeatedly saved the noble consort's spiritual pet and alleviated her sorrows. His ingenuity is commendable. Effective immediately, Ping and Bo is promoted to 2nd-class earl, granted fertile lands in Baichi, 100 bolts of white silk, and 10 maids and servants combined. As soon as the words were spoken, Lin Xiao and his parents were stunned. Lin Xiao felt that the process of elevating a noble title was far too simple. Just one word from the imperial consort Nyang Nyang was enough. Was this still the tightly controlled system of noble enfeoffment? At this moment, Lin Xiao's mother was the first to react, immediately taking out a large silver ingot and handing it to Manager Li. Seeing this, Manager Li didn't smile openly, and both sides were delighted. Not long after, Lin Xiao personally escorted Manager Li out the gate. Just as Lin Xiao turned to head home, he suddenly saw Lord Dongxing Wei with his son, hiding by the corner of Lin Xiao's house. Helplessly, Lin Xiao called the two over to talk. It turned out, the father and son had come to thank Lin Xiao. Because of Lin Xiao, in the last battle of the immortals, he not only kept his position, but was even promoted. Now, he was the Lord Magistrate of the Dongxing Yamen. So today he brought his son to personally thank Lin Xiao for his kindness. Hearing this, Lin Xiao pretended not to care, but his words subtly reminded the Lord Magistrate not to think that promotion meant he could cozy up to other nobles. Lin Xiao could lift him up, and he could also bring him down. At this moment, the Lord Magistrate clearly understood Lin Xiao's meaning. No matter what Lin Xiao said, he didn't dare to contradict him. In fact, he had no backing in the court to begin with, or else he wouldn't have let others point fingers at him. If Lin Xiao was now willing to be his backer in the court. He was absolutely eager to accept. Then, Lin Xiao directly told him to lift the ban on Lihua Courtyard, and informed him that Miss Tsai from Lihua Courtyard was his friend, and he needed to look after her regularly. Hearing this, the Lord Magistrate nodded vigorously, promising Lin Xiao he would personally handle these matters. Finally, the Lord Magistrate presented the gifts he brought to Lin Xiao, which surprised Lin Xiao. While others sent silver or the like, this old guy sent a cartload of fine wine. Initially, Lin Xiao didn't want to accept it, as he wasn't a drunkard, and couldn't possibly drink so much. But Lin Xiao suddenly remembered Li Baizhang's incredible drinking capacity, having once been out-drunk by him. To replicate his thunder art, he needed to get him drunk first, and to get him drunk, ordinary wine wouldn't do. Distilled liquor technology was necessary. Lin Xiao then brought the fine wine, hurriedly produced overnight using distillation techniques, to the art academy. However, just as Lin Xiao entered the school gate, he ran into a resentful-looking Xuaning. After a few words, they immediately started bickering loudly, showcasing their verbal sparring skills. This was another round of battle between the playboy and the schemer, and the loser wasn't allowed to cry. Through their conversation, it was clear that in terms of sharp wit and thick skin, our Sea King Lin truly had the upper hand. He made Xuan Ninger blush and her heart race. However, while the two were dueling, a suitor of Xuan Ninger suddenly appeared, to win her affection. He even stole his family's heirloom jade enhancer, and said he wanted to give it to Xuan Ninger, just to make her smile. At that moment, Xuan Ninger remained perfectly calm, showing this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. She handled the situation with practiced ease, but still, she pretended to be utterly surprised. In the end, she simply dismissed the man with one calm sentence. That was, "You're a good person, all along. I've only seen you as a friend." With that, the suitor left with his head hanging in defeat. After he left, those two lovebirds resumed their duel. However, the woman thought she was acting, but the man knew they were both putting on a show. This alone made it obvious who had the upper hand. If they kept on playing like this, the outcome was already predictable. As a Sea King, one day you must pay the price for your deeds. At this moment, our Sea King Lin was punished by the heavens, struck by lightning until he was completely naked. Just moments earlier, Lin Xiao and Xuan Ninger had an acting showdown. After sending Xuan Ninger off, Lin Xiao went with Li Baizhang to the lake near the Arts Academy. Believe it or not, two grown men had quite a lot to talk about. They actually argued over whether to choose one tree or embrace an entire forest. The conversation jumped from rice cooking methods to whether super science existed in the universe. At that point, these two fools were hitting it off more and more. Seeing the vibe was great. Suddenly, Lin Xiao pulled out a small jar of wine from who knows where, and flirtatiously said to Li Baizhang, "You've got stories, I've got wine. As they say, old stories and aged wine only get better." Hearing that, Li Baizhang, seeing the mood was already set, didn't hesitate any longer. He took the wine jar from Lin Xiao and casually opened the lid. Suddenly, an aroma unlike anything he'd ever smelled wafted out. It was so fragrant, it soothed the soul, rich and reviving, making Li Baizhang drool. The aftertaste lingered endlessly. It turned out, this little jar of wine was the essence distilled from 10 jars of fine wine, gifted to Lin Xiao by the Eastern Command. It was specially brewed to get Li Baizhang drunk. Once he was drunk, Lin Xiao could copy his art. Cut to a forest 10 miles outside the capital. Lightning danced across the sky. However, the spectacle sent the nearby villagers into a panic, thinking some heartless scumbag finally got struck by lightning. No one knew how long passed, but after the final bolt of lightning, a human figure slowly emerged. That figure was completely naked, revealing a smooth-skinned man. A closer look revealed it was none other than Lin Xiao. It turned out, after getting Li Baizhang drunk with that wine, Lin Xiao had copied his thunder art, and to keep it a secret, he quietly went to the outskirts to train. As a result, he secretly trained alone in the wilderness. After finishing his thunder art training, his clothes had been completely shredded by countless lightning bolts. Cut to a heavy rain had begun to fall from the sky, just as Lin Xiao stepped outside the capital gates. By sheer coincidence, a horse-drawn carriage happened to pass by. Seeing Lin Xiao walking alone in the rain, the driver kindly invited her to get in, saying he'd take her home for free. Hearing this, Lin Xiao let out a soft sigh, just as she was about to refuse. Suddenly, a dagger came within 0.01 centimeters of her temple. Thankfully, Lin Xiao's reflexes were quick enough. She instinctively dodged the lethal strike. Before she could react again, a man from the carriage lunged at her with a sword. He swung without hesitation toward Lin Xiao. At the same time, Lin Xiao had no strength left to dodge, nor any space to move. In the next second, the sword pierced straight toward her chest. However, at that critical moment, Lin Xiao activated her ice technique, forming a small ice shield over her chest, once again narrowly deflecting the blow. But right now, the assassin was no amateur. He immediately circulated his inner energy, infusing it all into the sword, preparing to pierce straight through her chest. the situation turned urgent. The ice was about to be shattered by the blade. Lin Xiao couldn't afford to keep hiding her strength. She immediately used a bare-handed sword snatch technique. At the same time, she activated the thunder technique she had just copied. In the next instant, the assassin was paralyzed from head to toe by electricity. As he froze up completely, a massive opening appeared in his defense. Just then, Lin Xiao launched a powerful punch. Her fist carried the strength of 12 layers of thunder power. One blow was enough to make the assassin spit blood and send him flying over 10 meters away, crashing into the carriage and smashing it to pieces. At that moment, seeing that the assassin could no longer get up, Lin Xiao finally relaxed. The mental relief, combined with her internal injuries, Lin Xiao could no longer hold on and slowly passed out.